Hey guys. We're gonna go through the patch video and maybe even a little bit of like listening. From the VOD, the interview. We'll see. Kinda need to like find it, so I didn't really check that out at all.
Hey.
I don't have 44 of them. How many do I have? 40 of them. Okay. 250? Really? When did that happen? Damn. I think I need to stack a little bit more of these. 245. Chaos is probably going to be gaining value if I have to guess. Like, I should stack Chaos in my opinion. If anything. Annulment is losing value. I have so many Orb of Chances. Interesting. Don't have any breed stones anymore, do I? Yeah, sold them already. Alright, let's do some like sales in this tab, because I think stuff are a little bit too heavily priced, which is what I usually do. Let's just reduce the prices. Really, this is only gonna go for a divine. I'm sad about that helm. Certainly. I might as well keep this for leveling. This beautiful helm. 35% all resistance. I think people are playing with like an offensive helm instead of the stats one, right? So it's not that popular or something, I'm not sure. That is good. Let's see. Good day, Dade. How are you?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2. Well, we're back from our break. We've been playing the game a whole lot and we've been reading a whole lot of feedback as well. So it's time to assess and work out what we're going to do next. Now, later this week we'll be releasing PoE 2 0.1.1. This is a patch designed to address the concerns that we can address relatively quickly, without needing to create a new league or a new economy just yet. In this video we'll be going over some of the issues we've identified and what we're planning on doing about them. It's worth stressing that just because a specific issue isn't on this list doesn't mean that we're not aware of it or that it isn't going to get addressed. It just means that we either can't fix the problem quickly or we can't do so without the need for a new economy. One of the major areas that needs a lot of attention is the base experience of mapping. We've made a lot of changes here. First, in-game maps have received a balance pass to the number of monsters, number of chests, number of magical rare monsters, number of essences, strongboxes and precursor artifacts. You should generally find maps more rewarding than before. Maps generally specialize in one or more of these elements that they will be particularly rewarding in. Now, towers are a thing that's very important for players to run often, but we only had one of them. We wanted to add more variety here as soon as possible, so we've added 4 more tower maps. Alpine Ridge, Sinking Spire.
The only way to make the towers something that I would like to run is, you know, like there needs to be some sort of like a random chest at the end or something. That random chest, you know, having a chance to like contain some extra maps, maybe some currency, you know, something else basically. Like if you want to keep running this, I think like just adding new layouts is probably not gonna like fix things in my opinion. That's what I believe. But I guess we'll find out after playing.
Bluff.
The problem with that is that the agency is not there. You have to run it is the problem, I think. I want to say. Like you're kind of like, you have to go through this and you will most likely not get anything. So like therefore you put something bad because like they cannot keep up with like a normal map run. Certainly not. If you give like a, you know, S tier layout to one of the towers, I suppose like maybe it is good to like juice that tower specifically. But then it becomes a little bit like frustrating to try and locate these towers as well and then buff it accordingly. You want the tower to be buffing everything else. You don't really want to buff the tower, so like it's going against its logic. So I think there needs to be tiny bit more rewarding thing at the end of the tower, except like, you know, other than just clicking the thing.
And Mesa. We've also redone the existing Lost Towers map to make playing there less boring. We're now also spawning more maps with bosses. The rate was intended to be 1 in 4 maps, but in reality the rate was much lower due to some maps being unable to spawn bosses. We've increased the rate to compensate for this issue so that we can get the actually intended rate.
More bosses is more
We're
loot.
also adding a new type of tablet that allows you to add bosses to your maps with its own mod pool. Strongboxes also needed some love. They now spawn monsters faster, have a less annoying fog effect, and have also received changes to the timings and effects of the mods on them. Now, let's talk about visibility of effects. Many maps had too much clutter, preventing effects on the ground from rendering, causing you to be unable to see and dodge them. We've both changed the level of clutter on some maps, and has changed some effects to make sure that they are always visible.
Sounds good.
In addition, elemental explosion effects have had visibility improved. Stick around for longer before they explode, and disappear without exploding if a rare monster dies.
That right there is like, in my opinion, the biggest change that is coming. The elemental explosion disappears without exploding if a rare monster dies. That is just too big. You have no idea like how many times you're just sitting on the side and waiting for elemental explosions, or like I'm just dodging out of the elemental explosions like because I'm realizing I'm sitting in something. That's killing me. It's just stupid gameplay.
Volatile plants are also way easy to see before they explode. Now we've also increased the zoom level on the Atlas, done a pass on various terrain collision issues in many maps. We've also improved the load times of opening the world map and Atlas pack.
That's huge for campaign.
And we also now show the biome of a map on the hover forum.
I keep on opening the map all the time.
For
you
other
can see the
in-game content
biomes,
systems, we're focusing on getting all the rewards in line with what they should be. For Delirium, we recently fixed a bug which caused Delirium monsters to just not spawn after the starting part. And we've also buffed the rate of simulacrums dropping by 20% to make it more in line with the rate of finding the Expedition and Ritual bosses.
20% only.
For Ritual, we've made Omens now appear in the Ritual Tribute window 60% more often. For Expedition, we've improved the rarity
Omens
from the
are going
shops,
down.
but we'll be wanting to make some more substantial changes to the rewards for this league later on.
I had to go
And one of
brush
the
my
major
teeth,
concerns
by
that
the
we're
way.
often seeing is that getting to play
awful
pinnacle
right
content
now.
just takes too long, and that when you do finally get there, you only get one attempt and don't get a chance to learn the boss. In order to address these concerns, we're making the following changes. First, we're making the Citadel spawn closer to the center of the Atlas, and we've also added an effect so you can see them in the fog of war from further away. This makes them much easier to find. To address the problem of only having one attempt, on the Arbiter of Ash you will now get up to 6 respawn attempts. Respawns can only be triggered by the person who put in the keys, and everyone on your party will be respawned at the same time. Leaving the map still forfeits your attempt, so you'll still need to fight the boss with the build you walked into the map with. Higher difficulties of the boss will lower the number of respawn attempts you get, but you should know the mechanics of the fight by then, right?
Right.
Now, we'll also be adding respawns to other pinnacle content as well over time. Another thing that players have noticed is that there are less keys from Faradin Citadels on the market, and thought that it was because the Citadel spawns less often. It turns out though that this is just because the boss kills players more often than the others. We've made a few changes to that boss to bring it in line with the other bosses. A lot of people have reported that many of our unique items are feeling underwhelming. Uniques are often designed to be build enabling at high levels, even if they're low level uniques. But we realised that we do need to make sure that more uniques feel powerful when you first get them at low levels too. In this patch, we are buffing a lot of uniques.
Buffing a lot of uniques, guys. It's hard to see. Higher value armor. Elemental resistance. The Blackbeard. The armor applies to elemental damage. I wonder at like what rate. That's an interesting. I think I have a Blackbeard in the game, right? Let me see. Yeah, I have one. Oh, it's such a awkward item. Armor applies to elemental damage. I would have to try, because like it doesn't have any level requirements. Maybe you just slap this on and you're golden with leveling. The only problem is that like it's while leveling, the most important thing is obviously movement speed, and this is an armor base, which means you're reducing your movement speed if you equip this. It's not the best thing, right? But it is an incredible leveling unique if you want to play it safe, that's for sure. Like for a hardcore, like this looks extremely good to me for the early game. Very early game. Like should be able to give you like 30 levels right there. A quality version of this is like what's 200 no 140 armor or something. That's going to be kind of nice. I actually like it. It's not too bad. But like thinking about hardcore, I think. Even further reduced gas speed. Now it gives a little bit of energy shield. So like further reduced gas speed, but more energy shield and intelligence on the gloves. This is a buff. It's funny how they cannot necessarily come up with like anything without having a downside on it. Recover 3% life per second when surrounded. The Bramblejack. For the thorns, I guess, right? Cannot evade enemy attacks. Extreme bleeding on this one. And then this guy's coming with like reduced attack speed. I've seen this meme on Reddit. This is a buff, by the way. It has some more damage on it, but it is coming with like crazy reduced attack speed, which is probably going to be feeling even worse while leveling. Poor item. 5% crit chance. Okay. Is there like no downside to that, or am I like failing to see it? I think the Frost Breath looks kind of nice. It's just a very low level item. That's the problem. Like, you can't really scale this in the late game, right? It's an interesting item. This should be like fun to play and level up with as a cold strike or attack build for sure.
These changes should make finding
It
uniques at
shouldn't
lower
really
levels a
reflect to
lot
the
more
late game
fun,
at all though.
and make subsequent character playthroughs more.
Oh, there's one more page. Okay, let's look at this as well. Rarity. The gamble sprints. Attacks chain 2 additional times. I legitimately have a hard time reading it. It's just too blurry and too far away. Like, if I make this bigger, a little bit easier, I suppose. 30% increased shield duration on the enemies. And a lot more damage on it as well. I mean, it's all leveling items, it looks like to me. Very early game oriented. Skills are reserving 50% less spirits, so half. It's not reduced, right? Oh, I really like this one. Meticia. I think it's incredible, actually. But then again, like, you go for the stacking coach's staff, and it's like so much better, right? But when I look at this, it's at least looking like a proper buff on this. Like, these elemental nodes are going to be destroying your target. They have adjusted the well, this thing is quality. For some reason it's not adjusted, it's exactly the same, so they didn't necessarily nerf physical damage. It's kind of awkward that like they picked a quality version over here to like showcase. What is that about? Lazy. Oh, this is completely changed. The Painter's Servant. It used to be like elemental damage converts to cold, fire and lightning, and now that stays, and you also gain as extra. This should be a bitch to code, by the way. Like, 33% of the elemental damage is now cold, fire, and lightning. Like, how does it convert elemental damage? No matter what it is, I suppose, like, it's just dividing to 3. What happens to the 1% that's remaining? I just cannot think of it. It probably stays, right?
More fun too, when you have some great...
Alright, right there. 10% reduced dexterity intelligence. You have no life regeneration, but it increases your strength by 9 extra percent now, and huge armor increase. %30 increased strength. At the end of the day, that is more life for you, especially on a gemling, maybe? What was like gemling's passives again? Wasn't it capable of like gaining more from these attributes or something? I had to check that out once again. Didn't really play a gemling yet, so. Smithing hammer. No level requirement. Hits break armor automatically. Dude, every single one of these items are looking very underwhelming to me. Don't know. And they're like just leveling, right? It looks like they're leveling stuff.
Great uniques to use.
Don't know.
We're also changing a few other things to make finding rares better at higher levels too. First, we're changing mod weightings a bit to make sure that there are less bad mods. Another fix is making high...
How do you boost Sekemas? You just need to be good enough so that like they are not getting hits whatsoever. Just run it through first 4. There's no difference between first 3 and 4. Like, the only thing that I know is that, like, he doesn't come upstairs on the last boss, basically. Right? Yeah, 4 is difficult without the movement speed. It's doable, though. It's doable still. And if you have, like, good relics, you do have movement speed on relics as well. But you should try it, in my opinion.
High tier items no longer cull the highest tier modifier of a given mod type. This bug caused bows and crossbows to not spawn with attack speed at tier 5 rarity, and rings to not spawn with life at tier 5 rarity.
So does that mean we're gonna have like rings and what did he say? Rings and what? Okay, that's attack speed. This goes the bows and crossbows
to not spawn with attack speed at tier 5 rarity, and rings to not spawn with life at tier 5 rarity.
Okay, that's good that I
Another change we're making is to make it so that socketables such as runes can now be overwritten with another socket.
This is huge, you guys. This thing right over here is massive. It just increases the value of all of the items that is already in the game, because now the items are not broken if somebody puts a wrong rune in there. And then also it increases the, you know, self-found experience a little bit more, because like now you can keep on adjusting your item to your need. Hey Mario, I hope it also works with the corrupted items. I am not sure about that, Mario. It might, because it's a socket. Because if you think about it in PoE 1, right, our sockets continued working on corrupted items. You were able to, you know, slot anything in them, but you were not able to change their colors. Unless you do some like specific stuff. So like it could go both ways. It's kind of hard to tell, but I'll take this. This is already really huge, of course.
Now, as we continue to play, we still find many balance anomalies with specific monsters or bosses that can be nasty if you encounter them. This patch contains a pass adjusting a large number of those monsters and bosses. We'll save the full list for the patch notes, but there are a significant number of changes here that should address many cases where monsters or bosses felt too hard in certain circumstances.
There's one more thing that Jonathan said, something along the line of this at the start of this video, yet another nerf towards the monsters. So I think they are gradually, it feels like they are going to be like gradually toning down the monsters and the end game, and they will see how it goes in this, you know, economy, let's say, before the league hits. And they will do it one more time if necessary. You know what I mean? Until the point where within the league, we'll probably have like a crazy nerf bat to the specs that are like ridiculously scaling in the end game. But then hopefully they won't need to buff literally everything else, because like all will be in, you know, capable. Perhaps they will be capable of like doing the late game as well. I don't know. It seems that way to me, because like there are lots of nerfs towards monsters and bosses.
Here are a few examples to get a taste of what kind of changes you can expect. The Silver Fist Commander roll now does a lot less damage. Plague Bearers Detonate Dead can no longer be used from off-screen and has better telegraphing.
All of these are huge W.
Forsaken Miners throw less grenades, have improved visuals, and deal less damage.
Wait.
Hi, what can I get you?
You alright, mate?
Oh,
Not much.
Are you British?
Okay, look at this. Where is it? Here. Forsaken Miners, by the way, guys. Do you see them? They're there. One over here. One over here. I think there are like 2 under me. Like, good luck seeing it, you know? Like... Oh, like I am standing on a land, like, minefield right now, and it's impossible to say. Boom. You know, like that's going to be a good change for sure.
Have improved visuals and deal less damage. And Lost Men Zealots can no longer meteor you from off screen either, as well as many other changes just like those. One of the big issues for players on consoles is that the web-based item filter system is currently not working. This means that they can't use item filters like the PC users can. For 0.1.1, we'll be enabling the same system that PoE 1 has, which allows you to subscribe to item filters on the website. For now, this will be done on the PoE 1 website to allow us to get this feature out as fast as possible. Later on, we'll improve the user experience of this and put it on the Path of Exile 2 website. This patch also contains a bunch of other smaller changes and bug fixes that I'm sure you guys will appreciate, like buffing armor and scavenged plating, showing the number of uses left in your charms, as well as an effect when they trigger,
The Song of the Exiles.
fixing the music that Una was supposed to play in town, and plenty of other little fixes and improvements throughout the game. Now, we have a huge amount of much more meta-shifting changes that we know we want to make. And one of the best things about having the game in early access with the endgame is that we now have a much better idea of where we want character power to be and what the balance of bosses and monsters should be relative to that. But those types of changes are going to have to wait until we are ready to make a new league with a new economy for people to play in. That's still a little while away yet, but in the meantime, we'll be continuing to identify things that are causing frustration and try and address them. I want to thank you guys for playing and hope to be doing more of these in the future. Later.
Okay, that was pretty W patch. Now it's going to be big in my opinion. We can try to listen to the interview a little bit while I'm fixing my stash and running some maps. I think some Darth microtransactions. I think so. I want to say. Let's see. Maybe it is on Gazi's channel. Guys, do you know in which? Maybe it's on Gazi. Yeah. YouTube is smart. Did you see that? Did you see what happened? That's very interesting. The algorithm is extremely smart. That was crazy. That's surprising.
Of audio now. Hello, everybody. So
Hello.
here we are. Let's just real quick, now that we have the audience here, I'm going to have Jonathan one more time say something real quick just to make sure they can hear us well, and we'll get feedback from the chat.
Mark was saying, I mean, you have so many spikes, orb, fireball, I doubt you will see it change. No, it's... maybe not, maybe. But it was the foliage that was causing it mostly, Mario. To be honest, in the interviews, there's so many weird questions and stuff, like people want to have more map drops, waste downs, I can kill you with the maps. Almost have like quad tab full of like 15s. Yeah, I can imagine, because it's like community questions, right? But I think it's still like something that you could appreciate for developers to be able to like put themselves in front of the screen and just like take those questions and try to answer them as best as they can. I am sure they're also having a hard time when it comes to like answering these things, you know, trying to keep like a perspective and like an approach with their answers so that like it doesn't necessarily get absorbed as like negative or like, okay, we're not gonna buff that forever, you know, this is my like, you know, clear cut line, etc. Like it's actually not that easy to answer these things in my opinion most of the time. So like always leaving an open door behind and stuff, like I think it's a cool thing that like they're doing this. It's not too bad at all. Definitely, it's much better than having something scripted. Like this is definitely not scripted, right? It cannot be for like too long. They probably do share a list of questions with them so that like they know what is coming and then they don't necessarily need to like make so much research. But I don't think there's like okay, don't ask me this type of question kind of thing at all, which is pretty good for the community. I rather want Delirium to stop pushing me around 10,000 miles before I can kill them. Yeah, that is extremely annoying. That's one of the things that I really would like to change as well. I was whining about it all the time yesterday.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2.
Thanks, sir. Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark. Hello, this is me speaking, and I didn't want to say the same thing he said.
I think it's a little bit loud for you, right?
All right, and then lovely co-host Gazi here.
Lovely co-host. Mic check. 1 2 3. 1 2 3.
Excellent. So with that being said, Gazi, why don't you take it away with the intros?
Hi, welcome to Tavern Talk episode. We still have no idea what episode we're on, and we're going to keep up with that trend. We have with us my lovely co-host, Darth Microtransaction, and the lovely two individuals that is basically the OGs at this point. We got Mark and Jonathan from Path of Exile 2 Grinding Gear Games. How are you guys doing?
Oh, doing great. I mean, like it's really good to get back into things again. We had a good break, yeah, I don't know. It's just nice to be back and actually looking at the problems again, as much as, it can be painful sometimes. But yeah, no, it's real good to get back into things.
Yeah, disconnected for a little bit, not too long, but just a little bit, and now back, which is awesome. But no, it was a long burn last year, so it was good to get a little bit of a break over that Christmas. But yeah, lots to address, lots to change. Excited.
And it
Awesome
seems
to hear.
it seems like with the break, you guys still managed to get a lot of changes in from the review video we saw. It's fairly substantial, so that's exciting.
I mean, that is for the most part just stuff that we did, like last week and this week. The maps, the extra 4 maps, some of those did have some work that was done a little earlier, but for them because we knew we needed more towers and we just didn't get them in. But pretty much all that stuff is just stuff that we're just doing last week and this week. Like we try to move fairly quickly when we can. But yeah, the thing now is of course going to be like. One issue we kind of realized we had is like, okay, how much do we concentrate on fixing problems people have right now, and how much do we concentrate on like the next big kind of content patch? And so that's like kind of the tricky thing we have to maneuver around at the moment. And I guess my feeling is so long as there's like big problems that are causing people to have like a bad experience, I kind of want to make sure that those get addressed as soon as possible, at least where we can, so that we're making sure that things are in as best a state we like some kind of point of stability, so that we can concentrate on having the larger kind of like content patch after that.
That's great to hear. So for this episode or this interview or whatever we're going to call it, we've done what we can to make sure that we let the community get their voices heard. So most of the questions we're going to go through is questions collected almost exclusively from the community. We have a couple light, for some reason, questions and some warrior questions from Darth, and we have some minion questions as expected from my side of things. But most of the questions will be taken from the actual community. So I'm just going to kick us off so don't waste anyone's time. And we're going to start with a question saying, which of the changes that has been showcased was the team most excited to be able to announce?
Well, I guess that I'd say that like these changes, obviously, while the players are happy with them, we're not exactly excited about them per se, because these are just like fixes to things that are problems, right? So the stuff that we're excited about is the stuff we're not talking about, which is the content that's coming up in the in the larger one that'll have an economy reset and so on. So there's obviously a lot of stuff there, but for this stuff, it's just like really like, okay, what can we do to make sure that people are having a good time? That's kind of the main thing I would say.
Yeah, which is exciting in its own to see how much more we can improve, how many people having a good time. So,
so I mean, that's good. But yeah, really, it's like there's no one thing there where we're like, oh yeah, this is the amazing thing. It's like it's all just like, let's make the game not suck. That's kind of our main goal.
So
Good perspective.
So one of the changes for in-game maps is the changes to, you mentioned monsters, chests, rare monsters. What impact are you guys hoping that this change specifically is going to have in in-game mapping?
Well, I want this. Well, there's a couple things. It is just a general, probably 30% more kind of monsters, items, etc. from inherent maps. You get the thing where now the inherent map is higher value, and thus proportionately the league is less impactful. Say Breach, which is obviously in its own universe of craziness right now. But the idea is the base map is more rewarding, and thus adding the extra content is less necessary for, say, map sustain. The other thing is it will interact with different rolled maps differently. So we tried to do this better before early access began, but again, it should be now certain maps and certain mods that increase the chests, the rarity of chests, the rarity of monsters will have different benefits. So that's kind of cool that I want people to learn that over time and see what's beneficial, what multiplies better, and then you combine those things where you have this map's better for number of monsters, whereas this map's worse for number of monsters because they're multipliers. So like a really small map versus a really large map, actually before they were relatively consistent. Now that large map might have twice as many monsters as that small map, but it has the same density of monsters. So you don't just have big open empty spaces of nothing. So obviously now the number of packs, if you multiply that up, it has a much grander effect on the big map than it does the small map. But the small map is obviously easier to clear, faster to clear. So say if you're optimizing for bossing, you're probably going to try and have be applying more bosses to small maps using the new tablet. Or if you're doing leagues that, more like Breach, you might want smaller maps that way because you're focusing on just farming breaches as opposed to, say, delirium. Also, expedition favors, it doesn't really care if the map is large or small. So, you know, having those different kind of axes is really interesting, where you are thinking about that as you go. Now, people have to learn that, and that's cool. I actually want people to learn that and kind of post all their details on, like, this map's really good and this map isn't. And we've accounted for layouts, how fast they are to clear, all of that stuff. So certain maps that were more tedious to clear now have pretty drastic advantages on at least 1 or 2 different axes. So they might have a higher number of minimum monsters, rare monsters, higher spawn rate of rare monsters,
Higher
magic
number of
monsters,
rare
chests, who
monsters in
knows?
the sketched
There was a lot of
maps,
that balance that you
so
couldn't
that,
really
like,
do
you're
until you actually had experience playing them,
incentivized
right?
to
Because
run
it's
it.
hard to tell when you're just in development and you're not on a real character. Like, is this map actually fun or not, right? And the end game is we've got the least amount of testing, so it really did require, like, okay, some actual proper play and be like, okay, is this map, to really answer the question of is this map good or not? So now when we see that, then we can be like, okay, we need to make this change or that change in order to sort it out. So there's just been a lot of just like sanding off all the rough edges that in-game had by virtue of the fact that it just really wasn't as tested as what the campaign was. Go on.
That all being said, I'd say one thing it has introduced is it has added more bad luck or mistake protection to some degree, because if you would like fully juice a really small bad map, that minimum of bad is now much higher. And so, like, you all of a sudden now have invested all this wealth into this bad map. You've run it, and you're like, "What the? I didn't get anything back from it." So, the minimum is certainly now much better, which should hopefully protect a lot of people who are falling out of map sustain.
Yeah, but it still
Whereas,
is
like, a lot
Val
of the good
Factory, that's the
players who are a
problem.
bit more observant, a bit more familiar with PoE1, were just like happily sustaining maps. And so, yeah, you had these two ends of spectrum, and hopefully we've raised the minimum now with these changes.
So 2 follow-up questions. Since this was a question for later, but since we're talking about bad maps in particular, something you mentioned here, what is your guys' opinion on the current state of maps in the game? Not so much from a monster point of view, but of a layout of maps. So there are some maps people don't like as much. There are ones people really do like as much. Is your opinion that you need maps, for instance, like Mire, Augury, Val Factory? These are some of the least favorable maps. Do you think you need maps like this in the game in order to more appreciate the more common ones people enjoy? Or what's your stance currently on the map amount of variety that are in the game, put it that way?
I guess ideally, like if, so I mean, there have been a few adjustments to things like that. Probably not, like we're not necessarily going to take every map people find annoying and change it like so that people don't in that way. But certainly there should be balance changes to make it so that they feel at least worthwhile, even if they do have some more annoying layout or something like that. So I mean, I assume you feel the same way about that.
There's some standout things. Like obviously you shouldn't have the levers that you just can't dodge roll out of and you just die, or the levers are just spawning burning ground on them, right? Obviously this stuff is just objectively wrong and objectively bad, and that will be fixed. But a lot of that contributes to, like, this is the worst map because you'll go pull a lever and die while doing so. And then there's the ones that, yes, are just like, inherently worse layouts, especially for certain builds. But then again, now using this other thing where it's like, actually, well, those maps may now spawn the most amount of rare monsters or the most magic monsters or just the most amount of monsters.
Okay, am I missing something? Like, with my logic right now, what he's saying is that, like, okay, now that worst map can actually spawn the most amount of rares in the fucking game. Isn't that, like, extremely bad for the game? Like, we dislike the map because of the layouts and because of the playstyle. And you're telling me essentially, like, you're trying to make the game, you're trying to make that map the worthiest just because I dislike it the most. But I don't dislike it because it's not rewarding. Partially. But, like, Val Factory is not fun to play, Like, I could see with the Augury, certainly, up to a point. Don't know.
You're gonna have to go figure some of that stuff out, and some people might like that. People with less screen clearing AoE centric builds probably don't mind some indoor more mazy maps if they're going to get the benefit or feel like they're getting the benefit from more rare monsters. They've got, I don't know, more single target or a more concentrated DPS or whatever. They don't feel so bad now for running that as opposed to just running the sand spit where you can just like nuke entire screens every 2 seconds.
The bad case of this though is definitely the tower map, because it's like you mandatorily have to run that map, and so having that be not great is like not a good situation. So hopefully we've addressed that one. Like that was really urgent to address because it's like because it's mandatory, right? You can't just skip it. So that one had to be sorted.
Yeah, turns out it's maybe not a good thing where you have to approach a room full of monsters that you don't know what they are and they're super dangerous and you can't see them and it's a narrow bottleneck and you have to run in and just die.
But yeah, even so, like obviously the variety helps with that, but also the new version of that map is now based on the top floor tile set, which is like got more variety and like it's easier to deal with. So that should improve a lot of that.
Better visibility.
Yeah, exactly. So it
more
helps a lot.
open, less tight bottlenecks. Still they're still relatively narrow here and there, but yeah, much better to clear.
So one more follow-up here, and I'll pass it off to Ghazi. In the reveal, you mentioned that the boss maps, for instance, were supposed to be more common than they actually were. And so this comes to a very common question about Waystone's sustain. So what was your opinion on the state that previously was with Waystone's sustain, as well as do you believe this impact of additional bosses are obviously going to impact Waystone's sustain? So you think this is going to help alleviate some of the feedback we've seen related to there?
That one's pretty interesting because, and this is probably going to be a controversial thing to say, but like we don't know that there necessarily is a problem with Waystone Sustain as such. So that means we have to look into, if people say that there is, and that means we have to understand why that is, because I don't think that's the experience that like we're having as we're playing ourselves. And like, so there's always this thing where it's like we want to hear what the players say, but then we always want to confirm with our own experience that like when we do what they're doing, that we're getting the same experience before we can kind of make a good decision about what a change would be. So I don't know that we've identified why it is yet that players are having problems with Waystone Sustain. And so that's like, and this will change this obviously because there's more bosses and so on. Like that's the thing you're doing. Killing bosses will give you, upgrades and so on. Like that'll help with that. But I guess I sort of like, I feel like we need to understand that problem more before we can really work out what exactly needs to happen with it.
There's certainly more to learn there, but as I said before, the minimum's now higher for sure.
Right. So it can be just people running into bad specific maps that like have specific problems that someone who's.
I suspect it's also just a lot of people struggling with the difficulty and dying, and like it's obviously very different if you're dying even in 30% of your maps, 20% of your maps. I mean, even 10% of your maps. It can make that difference.
Well, they're kind of testing in the early access.
There's definitely 100% more to look into there. But like, I personally, I went to from tier 1 to tier 15 maps in a total of 32 maps, and I've sustained since. And then you see the things where people are talking about map sustain, and I'm like, okay, am I in a different universe? And the answer is probably
in a different universe.
The answer is probably yes, I am in a different universe. But from a purely anecdotal standpoint of my own, I try and I'm going to see how it is for myself, and I'm somewhere else. We need to look more into this somewhere. So we have other people at the office as well, of course, and you get their anecdotal experience, but we need to look at this from a much broader perspective. But either way, what we've just put forward is an improvement to all of that. Higher maximum, sure, higher minimum, and a bit more safety for bad luck. But what it doesn't really account for right now is safety for people dying and failing 50% of their maps or N% of their maps.
There is a slightly more subtle thing going on, I think, which it's kind of unfortunate how this turned out. But effectively, because you can power through the map tiers really fast, it means that you don't get a chance to find the gear that you would otherwise have as you went through those tiers. And that means that effectively when you do, like you might be playing higher tier maps than what you really should be playing for the amount of wealth that you've found. And that means that your map sustain is bad because you're dying more often because you're kind of playing higher tier content. And that is on us because we need to adjust that so that you you only start
it is true though. The less deadly the maps are,
we need to sort of gear
the
check
higher
you more as you go up a little bit to make sure that you've got the gear you need before you're going up the tiers. But this is going to be a really subtle and tricky thing to get exactly right. Like there's quite a lot to that, and that's kind of more of a thing that we can sort of look at over a bit of a longer period of time because it's going to require some adjustments. But yeah, that's just sort of another one. But there's quite a lot of implications to all of that, and I don't know that we're quite ready to understand exactly what would need to happen for that to happen. But that is kind of one of the issues that we're seeing is just effectively people playing content that's harder than what we would hope they would be playing for the gear that they have, which then causes the deaths, which causes the sustain to be bad. So that's kind of that issue there.
Thanks for the detailed answer. I'll throw it off to Ghazi for the next questioner.
Yeah, next in line, we're actually going to circle back to what you mentioned, Mark, regarding Expedition, not caring about the layout and whatnot, but you also mentioned, I believe it was in the video, right? You mentioned more substantial changes to Expedition coming later. So the question is, do you have any particular examples of these things you're hoping to accomplish with this mechanic?
Yeah, I can't really say what it is, but what I can say is it is intended that every league Sort of. I'd say without promising it, because we're allowed to make exceptions. It is kind of intended that every league provides some sort of access of character or crafting power that is abnormal. And so, you know,
Different that you can't get anywhere
different.
else.
Mostly character power here. So aside from the unique items, obviously.
Okay, so what I understand from this is they're actually considering, you know, making expedition, for instance, in this case, right? A little bit stronger when it comes to like crafting and maybe even like, you know, targets crafting. I think they're probably messing around with that quite a bit at the background. That also means that like if there is such a patch like ever, these coins and whatnot from the expedition, they're pretty worthless right now in the currency market. They're going to be incredibly worthy. If you want to invest, that is what it is that you should be looking into. For sure. That is what I understand from this. Because like he's trying to hold back because like there's no promises to be made. But at the same time, like what else is Expeditions going to offer other than like crafting, right? And there's also a global crafting, you know, feedback going on right now, so...
Obviously they can, or sometimes don't.
You missed the
provide
crafting batch?
character power
I
that
don't think
can be
we're
obtained
getting
elsewhere.
it. We got
This
runes
is
though,
more about
which is not
something
too bad
else
for
that's,
leveling.
You know, similar to say the instilling your amulet with a notable. You know, it's something that only that provides. It gives you more power than you would have had if you had never done it. And so ideally, every league would kind of do something like that.
Yeah.
Or
So
provide a crafting avenue that would then give you something like that. Or
yeah, in
give you
the
more
long
power
run,
in general.
yeah.
But yeah, we just kind of have the vendor mechanic where you can do some crafts, and none of those crafts are abnormal. They're not adding extra benefits or mods or anything outside of that. So yeah, we have intention to add something to that, and probably to a lot more of them over time. And as you get new ones that each obviously have this thing in mind, where we're trying to say, how can we make characters feel a little bit more powerful by engaging in that content? But yeah, Expedition just didn't quite get it when we ported it over. Like, you know, we discussed heaps of things, like we could add some more ROG crafts, so to speak, now that even though it's now 3 out of 4 of them crafts.
It definitely needs
you know,
something else, like
yeah,
for sure.
it just needs something cool, something better, and something not rushed. Which is we're in a position where we're going to rush something, and it's like, hold on, let's not do that. Let's get it right and do it a bit later.
Fair.
Fair. I like that take. Another question we have is regarding the Arbiter of Ash now having 6 resurrection or revive attempts, right?
There's no connection.
And other attempts to, or adding other attempts to other pinnacles over time. I guess the question comes down to why wait with adding extra attempts? To
ultimately, the reason is just time. So it might even be that in the patch that we do deliver, that some of those other ones are already done. It's just that because the video had to be made last week, and like we were like, are we gonna, like, we knew we would get time to sort out the Arbiter, and we were like, we don't know if we're gonna get time to do the others, so we'll just like promise that one, and then if the others come, then that's just a bonus. But yeah, effectively, there's like a little bit of trickiness around each one to like just work out all the states of everything. Like, I mean, if you're looking at like just as a random example, and this isn't obviously that big of a deal, but it's just, you know, someone has to do it, is like for the breach one, for example, we have to decide like, okay, so we can't really let you have the economy, like you can't reset the whole map because then you'd get the drops from the breach a second time. So then it's like, okay, we have to make sure we put a checkpoint in the thing, and that means we have to like do someone has to go write some code to like make the breach thing work correctly for checkpoints, and you know, it's just like random stuff like that, just little details that just mean that like it'll take a little bit longer to do those other ones. But I mean, we're not talking a really long time, right? We're just like, someone will get to it in the next couple of weeks. It's just, you know.
I'd say King in the Mist. King in the Mist will almost certainly be done because it's an isolated boss fight in a room with nothing else going on. Yeah. But for the logbook and for the breach one, you have to have some manual intervention, and we have to really make sure that there's none of that, like, you know, respawn at checkpoint at this exact point in time, and all of a sudden you get the loot again kind of thing going on, because. Yeah, that obviously can be quite destructive.
So yeah, it's literally just a time thing.
Tweaking gear as I go, trying to be less squishy, I'd say.
You know, get these things going.
One thing at a time, mate.
Speaking of Arbiter,
you cannot rush all of the gearing and upgrades.
Are Copper Citadels really the same spawn rate as all the others? That's what happened?
I mean, we generated a bunch of Atlas state and checked that they were equivalent. I mean, I don't know what to so we really were not intending to make a Monopoly game, McDonald's Monopoly game style thing here. It really was intended to be equal. So yeah, as far as we could tell, it was just the just that the boss had that exploding minion thing that like was the damage just busted on that?
Nah, well, maybe, but all of his little attached zombies, like during the phase 1 of the fight, they, when he summons the sandstorm and you get protected, and you have the zombies coming at you, they blow up after they die. And in the map version, the in-game version of this fight, some logic was missing. I don't know what happened, and those would then explode at the end of this phase 2. So you're like, oh, I killed him. You run in to get your loot, and 8 zombies just explode and insta-kill you. And so what you found is a whole bunch of people were just straight up like succeeding at the fight and then just dying straight afterwards. So that accounted for some portion of it. And then he was just harder. Certainly the death rate, even excluding the one-shotting zombies, was just much, much higher than the other 2. But yeah, we have now a cheat that generates or simulates generating I think it's 1 billion different blocks and calculates how many of every map spawned and everything like that, just to test this specific Citadel case. And yeah, everything we could find generates exactly the correct amount of the 3 things. So
speaking
the
of
3 Citadels.
Speaking of spawning Citadels, did you guys happen to catch any of the conspiracy theories related to, corpses pointing in directions, etc.?
It was so ridiculous. Whatever. People come up with crazy things. I don't know.
All right.
I can tell you. I see. The thing is, I'm tempted to actually do something weird like that now, just to just to bait the conspiracies. But no, there was nothing. There was nothing weird going on there.
It's just RNG. Like you have to. I did catch
it's
in
just
the video.
RNG. That's all it is.
It said closer to the centers, so there is something to being farther away from your spawn point.
So, but basically, all that is literally just that there. Where you start, there's just a radius you have to get to before they start spawning. But after that point, it's just they just spawn the same rate.
RNG,
and we just moved it closer just because since you can't really tell where the that's not obvious, right? And the main thing we want to do there is just not have a Citadel spawn right next to where you start, because that would be ridiculous. Effectively we just shrunk that down a bit because it was a little bit large. And then the other thing as well is that now that you can see them in the fog, it actually makes them so much easier to find. We actually intended, we were like, oh yeah, we're going to totally buff the number of these that there are. But after we made the change to seeing them in the fog, it was immediately like, oh shit, there's actually tons of these everywhere. We just weren't seeing them before. Seeing them makes a big difference.
Okay, so moving on, off the topic of Arbiter and Citadel.
It's the good thing to
you
be
mentioned in the video less
able to
bad
access
mods
Arbiter
on mobs. Can we get some more?
Oh,
detail?
sorry, it wasn't mobs. I think because it was in the item section, and maybe you misheard that slightly. But
Maybe I
the
did.
bad mods thing was talking about items. So effectively, there's some stuff going on here. So effectively, what we did, because a lot of people were talking about
occasional
issues
loot
with
explosion.
higher tier rares as you get to harder content. And effectively, when we sort of looked into this, we sort of worked out there were some anomalies around what happens when mods get cut out on the lower levels, just based on kind of somewhat random things about how many top tier mods there are of certain types and things like that. So what we've done is it's not huge changes, but we've kind of effectively done things I think accuracy went down a little bit, and there was I can't remember the other changes.
Accuracy went down, life on kill, mana on kill, on weapons at least, and then attributes on hybrid gear.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the hybrid gear attributes. And then there was also the bug where effectively high tier rares weren't getting the ability to generate top T1 mods of certain types, which I don't think was actually necessarily as big of a deal as what people might have assumed,
T1,
because it wouldn't have affected that many items, but we have fixed it. So, for example, it was just impossible on a T5 bow to ever get attack speed.
Once it was a certain item level.
Once it was a certain item level. So yeah, but you couldn't even get T5 realistically except from high level stuff, right?
You still
could occasionally, but whatever. The point is there was a few things like that that were going on, and we effectively just adjusted that stuff, and it should result in generally better rares when you're talking about high end, high tier stuff. So we'll just sort of see how that works out. The adjustments are not mega, but they are there, and they should sort of improve things, I think, a little bit.
And just for clarity's sake for the viewers, when you say top tier, tier 1, you actually mean tier 12 or whatever the top tier is, right? Because tier 1 technically is the worst.
Sorry, yeah, it's so annoying that we have tiers going in reverse directions in different contexts. But yes, what I mean is whatever the top tier of that mod is, in some cases it was getting cut out. In fact, I worry that even in the article that we're going to say that's actually incorrect. So I just need to fix that, because I think in the article that we posted, it says T1 item affixes, which is actually backwards. So I need to go and fix that after we've done this.
We also need to make this consistent everywhere and sort this tiered situation out.
Yeah,
I do have a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
It is sometimes very frustrating dropping something that has a high tier, but I don't know if that is the highest tier. Would it be possible? Like, is there something you guys are considering adding?
I think we are
way for us to
adding
see
a
that?
thing that displays on the mod if it is the best tier relatively soon. But again, we need to also just
That's good
figure out a
news.
little bit more around this because
That's
we've got this whole
100% good
T1
news.
versus
Hey,
The
clear me.
reason,
random
the reason
number
why
and-
there is resistance to having T1 mean the top one is because then if we add another one later, it changes what all the tiers are. And there was sort of some discomfort around that, but then maybe it's still better to just do that anyway.
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
I don't know. That was the original thinking behind that, but whatever. It might be less confusing if T1 meant... No, because the thing is, the other thing as well is that map tiers are like the T1 is the bottom one again,
fuck
and you
up
certainly
like
wouldn't want to
that.
reverse that. That would be weird. So yeah, I don't know. Like,
That's
probably,
enough.
yeah, whatever. This is just a random small topic, but just one of those things.
It's not
Understood.
random
Yeah,
small
yeah.
topic. It's
Speaking
pretty
of
good,
items
actually.
and quality, one of the most requested additions, item filters, coming to console. So I'm sure many people are very excited about that. Speaking of the topic of consoles, can we expect more quality of life things coming to console? For instance, I very commonly see asked for things like text, UI size, etc. Do you have any plans related to quality of life improvements for console?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need to do more there. I mean, yeah, like I don't have any specific things to announce there, but effectively we need to make sure that that experience is good. And one thing that I know, this isn't actually technically a console thing, but another thing that we will be doing for people who use controller soon is like the ability to fast swap between controller and the PC UI just
Excellent.
by like immediately in game, because that's something I believe there was even an implementation of that. It was just a little bit too dodgy to release on early access start. So we just need to get that sorted and then test and so that'll be another one. But in terms of just general console stuff, I mean, look, there's just more we can do, right? And you know, we've got our guys on console. They'll be looking into these things and just making changes. The text size one, I do think needs some addressing. It's a little bit tricky because there's kind of a lot of things all through the game that need like futzing around with. So that I definitely appreciate that. And like part of that is literally because when we're in the, this is kind of bad, but it's like in the studio, we literally have like a big screen and the couch that's near it is like relatively close. It's like an actual real world scenario. You know, people often sit a bit further away, and we probably should have been thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that just need some addressing for sure.
Fair enough.
All right. Putting aside bugs and tuning that is expected for early access state, there was a question that I was asking about what are the players' feedback that surprised you guys the most?
It's a good question.
Well, I know you were saying, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's like we had a lot of worries about things being broken. We just didn't know what those things were going to be. But then you were saying before that just the level of brokenness did surprise you as far as like some character builds and stuff, right?
Yeah, like I had my whole like, okay, obviously people are going to find broken builds, but like we escaped millions into tens of millions, and then we escaped tens of millions into hundreds of millions in measuring in DPS, and then we escaped DPS into comets per second, and then like you got to this point where it's like, okay, we're just off the reservation here in terms of just, you know, when you 1 week in and someone's like, here's my 450 million DPS build that hits the pinnacle boss for 141 million damage and one shots in the 3-player party, and I'm like, well, where are we? Like, what happened?
The thing that I found a little bit sad, and I guess we should have just expected this, is that like I sort of expected that the first few times people were playing the pinnacle boss, that would kind of be a normal fight. But in reality, the first few times people played the pinnacle boss was just completely like a disaster because like they just had some build that was because to get to the pinnacle boss the fastest, you also had to have like a ridiculously broken thing going on, and so you just ended up with just like like you don't even get to see the mechanics, and it was just like that was a bit sad to me.
Well, hopefully with more lives, people will actually be giving it a shot instead of just selling it off to those people who do one-shot it. But we'll see how that goes. But
I mean, the tricky thing about this has just been that, like, okay, so we do generally want to not do mid-league nerfs.
Juicy
And there was a period
fragments.
there before Christmas where we were making some changes, but we weren't even considering those to be mid-league nerfs because they still left things in a state that was still like very, very good. Like from our perspective, and like maybe the players would disagree with this, it was kind of like when we nerfed something there, we were still leaving it in a state where it's still some of the best shit ever. And so from our perspective, we were like, well, there'd be no reason to have to re-roll your character after this change because like it's still crazy.
Okay, so this is completely wrong because so many people actually got fucked when it comes to their comet builds because they were just building their character around comet, right? The comet wasn't necessarily an occasional buff, the build itself was the comet proccing, right? Am I wrong here? After that nerf, the character was not playable anymore unless you completely respec it and do something else with it. So this right here is wrong. Like what he's saying is that it is still strong, okay, relative to who? Like who is it strong for? For the occasional comet spawner? Like why do we care even about that comet?
So we didn't even really consider those to be mid-league nerfs in the same way. But then
It is a middle league nerf, 100%.
obviously
like
there's going to
that
have to
way.
be some changes because
destroying a
there are just
character
certain
even.
things that are just completely ridiculous. But one thing we've got now, and I kind of mentioned it in the video, is that like we actually have an understanding now of like what a character should look like. And so ideally when we do our first like true balance patch, we should be at the point where we can be like, okay, here's like these like 10 things that need to come down, but then there's also like these other 50 things that need to come up to get to that point, right? So like ideally it sort of should have, there should be a little bit of leveling there that occurs, but we really don't want to do that kind of patch without doing an economy reset because we actually need like to see what really happens when you get a new economy and all that sort of stuff. So, and when I say an economy reset, of course, what I mean is a new league. Like you'll still have the old characters if you want to play them, but all the stuff we're going to be looking at will be on the new economy that, in terms of like how it evolves that way. So, yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. It'll take us a little bit longer. But that is also what we're working on in the background as well, is just like getting all of this stuff to where it needs to be.
So am I
which is-
hearing
yeah.
that there's no nerfs coming in this patch then? Is that sort of what I'm taking from this?
I
Would you
mean,
say?
there might be a few that relate to things that are just completely screwed. But I don't. I mean, it is not our intention to do a big nerf patch here. Like that is not our goal. Our goal with this is like fix things that are annoying people and like make the game more playable. Whereas the goal of like the economic, sorry, not the sort of balance patch that's coming a little later would be like, okay, we'll have a new economy. We'll actually do like a proper balance pass where we get all of that stuff like more.
It's actually
You
hard to
scared
find a T16
everyone
that's
with that
experience rolling.
executioner photo
Yeah.
in the Twitter post. I mean, it looked like the guillotine was
I
about
just
to
cannot
drop.
find it, it seems like.
Okay, yeah, people look into things I think a little bit too much. Okay.
There's kind of three kinds of nerfs going on.
Yeah.
Not on this patch. Just
Yeah.
hold on. That was.
I do want to follow up
Anyway.
though with
In the backgrounds, there are 3 types of nerfs going on. Not on this patch, you can relax, but it's coming. What am I like? What is going on, man?
the comment on the balance patch coming later, and you want to combine that with a
Oh
economy
my
reset.
God.
So is that you saying that there will be economy resets during early access on a regular basis?
Yeah, so there
or we
won't be.
looking at-
They'll be in a new league, so you still get to keep your old characters. But effectively, yeah, absolutely during early access there'll be new leagues. What I don't want to say is like whether or not the league as so when I use the word league, people sort of assume that means there's like a league mechanic that comes along with it, and we might do that or we might not. We kind of need to work out what's going on there. But it'll be a new league in the sense that it's a new economy that people can play through, and we'll be introducing significant stuff that would want people to make people replay as well as doing all the balance stuff and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, we need to do that because if you can't really just make changes to balance like significant ones without screwing people's characters over, obviously. So you need to have some kind of thing like that in order to be able to do that.
Just going back quickly, we have a kind of few classifications of things we do address when it does impact balance, and we are trying to be ultra conservative, but if it is bricking instances, as in it is just absolutely tanking instances, affecting the performance and thus affecting the performance for other users, we almost always have to address it. You can't just let that be. Now we obviously try and reduce the impact on the server, generally because of some sort of infinite loop or anything of the sort like that, or something happening per frame that shouldn't happen, and all of a sudden now.
Like if you're getting the server frame rate to be like 1 FPS, then that is not alright, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to actually sort that. So that is something that we will do a mid-league nerf to address. But ideally in such a way where it still leaves the build perfectly viable.
Yeah.
It's just that it's no longer completely destroying what's going on.
The other things where it does nerf and has an impact is, of course, when there is simply something clearly not working intended. So like an example of that, which I won't try and pronounce, but the shield that increases effect of your socketed runes and soul cores, and that was just obviously applying to all of them, not the one socketed in itself. That is obviously a nerf. It was never meant to work that way. I don't think that really surprises anyone when that gets changed. It's very clearly not working as intended. So those two we're generally just going to pull the trigger on almost always.
Right.
We're still thinking like, okay,
I don't
especially
know
in the
why you
performance
cannot
case,
pronounce
that's,
it.
like,
It's
blatantly,
so clear. Mahut Shotl,
our
no?
fault, and there is economy there, and then obviously there are people who are going to lose their character builds because of it. Maybe, hopefully not. We try and obviously bring down the
can't find an
frequency or the
experience.
infinite loop element or the per frame while also buffing the damage, and then we make a note of it to like reassess this later when
Yeah,
there's
Andre.
a new economy, and we'll come back and reassess that. But often protecting the instances, protecting the server performance for other
That's what it
users,
is, I
and
guess.
obviously
I'll
fixing
try one more
bugs
time.
are, something we're going to do, and so that can have an impact. But just like at this point, preferably for all the other main nerfs where you're just blatantly nerfing someone's build or nerfing a build, we're trying to currently push that towards the economy/league reset kind of point. Yeah.
All right. It's a very extensive answer. Appreciate that. That's one of the things that makes this very fun for us to do. We ask a question, then we just lean back and let you guys do your thing. I love it. We are going to circle back to what you mentioned as well earlier, Mark. You said coming back to reassess a decision that's been made. And the topic we're going to open up is the two-step verification, security for accounts with certain things that's happened recently. So the real question that we come down to with everything that's going down is, I guess the first one is, was there a data breach at GGG?
All right.
And following that up with, are you going to reassess the decision of two-step verification?
All right. So this is unfortunately really sucks, and I was really hoping we'd get a post about this before we did this interview, but unfortunately we haven't quite finished assessing yet. So there has been a situation where someone got access to an admin account on our website, and we now understand how that happened. And we also understand, we don't fully understand the scope of everything that occurred here, but we're sort of in the process of like looking at logs and so on. And there was a few really shitty things that occurred here that I'm very unhappy about. So the first one, just to say this, is that the thing that happened here was actually kind of the same thing that happened a while ago when through a Steam, effectively a Steam account was compromised through Steam support. So effectively what happened is one of our administrator accounts had a Steam account associated with it. And this was a Steam account that the person who had it attached didn't really kind of know. I mean, obviously they could have checked, but like they didn't really consider the fact that this was like this old Steam account that they don't even use anymore was attached to their admin account. And so effectively what happened was that got compromised through Steam support. So I don't know like all the details exactly what happens there, but effectively what happens is that like they are able to somehow provide like details that they managed to find on someone, like the last 4 digits of their credit card information or whatever, through that they get through some other kind of means, and then they provide enough information to Steam support where they're able to get Steam to change the credentials on the account, which happened without us noticing, because once again this was an account that this person doesn't log into, so there was no they didn't realize that this has occurred. And then another thing. This was compounded by the fact, and this one was really, really crap, that whenever a customer support person makes a change to an account, they there's like an audit log, right, of like all the actions, like the events that they've done. And this effectively means that like when we investigate like, hey, what's happening with this account that got compromised, like we obviously look at the events and see like, hey, was there anything, like what happened here, right? Did someone change a password? Was something going on with that? And there was actually a bug where the event for setting a new password on an account was incorrectly in the back end labeled as a note rather than like an audit event. And what that meant was that, so notes are things that like customer service can add to people's accounts and they can edit them and delete them. And so the password change thing being a note could be deleted by a customer service person accidentally rather than being rather than being permanently there in a way that no one could change.
What am I even doing?
And
I
so
was
that
doing
effectively meant
16s.
that, what was happening is the person who managed to get an account, they
Trying
were
to find an experience
compromising
node on
accounts
it
by
now.
setting a random password, then deleting the node afterwards to say that had happened. And so when we would look at accounts, we just wouldn't see this, and so it was like really not obvious to us that
But I couldn't find one.
what was going on there.
I have too many maps now, so I don't want to
full
continue
information yet
rolling.
about exactly the extent of everything that happened, but what I can tell you is that 66 notes were deleted. So that would imply that 66 accounts were compromised. Now, it does extend slightly back further than what our log history is. So I think there's like, so we only keep logs for 30 days. And that's like a whole, privacy rules around that stuff means that that's your log retention. Now, there were 5 days before that where the account was compromised, but this is all pre-launch of PoE2. So effectively, there were the 5 days back in November when we don't have logs for, and then after that point, there were 66 accounts that were that had notes deleted. Now, the reason why I am using that phraseology here is because the things were deleted from the frickin' event stream. Like, we literally don't know what happened here. Like, the only thing I've got to go by is the web server logs, which don't actually record, like, you know, all the data that's sent in a web request. It's just like the address of the page they went to, right? So effectively we can see like basic information, but because the thing itself that they were doing involved deleting the frickin' records of the fact that they were doing it, meant that, like, you know, yes, it's unfortunately very difficult for us to track down full information about this. Now, we are going to be posting a post with like all the information that we can possibly gather that we're sort of still gathering. And we were obviously initially very afraid that there'd been some kind of larger data breach here where like they would somehow had access to our servers or something like that was going on. Like because we had no idea initially, right? So we're kind of like, oh shit, you know, what the hell's going on here? But now that we've understood that the vector was via a Steam account like that, it kind of means that like effectively what they had access to was the same stuff that customer service had access to, and all of that stuff is logged except this one thing that was not like logged due to this other thing. And then since then we've also added a bunch of extra security stuff that honestly should have already been in place around this to sort this out. So all of that is to say that like, yeah, we totally fucked up here with like security stuff on this account. Like, we're certainly not going to have any Steam accounts linked to, like, we're going to audit, make sure that there's no Steam accounts linked to any customer service admin accounts any longer. Like, that certainly needs to not happen if there's going to be this kind of attack vector. As well as we've added a few other measures that, you know, to just make sure that this sort of shit doesn't happen again. Yeah, all of that really, really sucks. And especially because, like, as I said, just due to the fact that the stuff about it is deleted, we can't, like, easily find out what even frickin' happened. So there's going to be more investigation and working out what's happening here. But, yeah, that seems to be what occurred.
So just to quickly, for the people that are going to give it like a quick recap, this was a social engineering breach. This was not like a server-side data breach of an admin account. And this is a one-off, one account. It's now a closed case scenario. The viewers do not have to do anything on their side to worry about their information.
So the moment that we realized that something had gone wrong, we just immediately reset all the passwords on all the admin accounts and deleted all the sessions just to make sure that everything was kosher. So from that moment on, there was no more like accounts getting compromised or anything like that.
Sure.
And then now it's just been a matter of us like doing a bunch of log analysis, and it's actually quite like. Because the only way we've got it is the web logs, and it's taking a while just to process all the stuff, and there's obviously a lot of human investigation. Like, we just haven't yet been able to prepare a full report about it, but we are going to be posting one hopefully.
Kind of sucks like how much manpower this probably even like takes from them.
That was just
honestly.
really, really crappy. So then going back to the actual question about two-factor authentication, I mean,
well, honestly, something like this happening now is the
case,
best case scenario
because it was compromised through our freaking
I mean,
support interface, right? Except for that, probably it would have helped in the sense that if we had added like if there was two-factor auth, presumably the bug about where it didn't get logged when someone changed it wouldn't have applied to that, because, you know, it's a new thing that they wouldn't have had the same bug for. So I suppose it would have helped in that sense. But yeah, like that's the thing with that. So then talking about two-factor auth. So first of all, I'm like completely not against two-factor auth in any regard. The only issue with it is that it's easy to implement two-factor auth. What is hard to implement is all the policy around how to recover when people inevitably lose their second factor. And so that's the kind of tricky part to actually deal with. And so like, it's kind of one of those things where like, yeah, we will do it, but like we're just not quite prepared yet to be able to do it with all the customer support stuff we would have to do. And like, and it's kind of one of those annoyingly deep holes of like, okay, so like, someone loses their password, what do you do to verify it? Like, you know, the two-factor auth thing, what do you do to verify this? And it's like, okay, so now you start to have to worry about like what personal information can they give you, and then now it's like storing personal information, and then like what's the GDPR implications of that, and like there's just like it's just like a whole rabbit hole of just like random policy
but you're gonna need to go into that rabbit hole. There's no other way, my man.
Yeah, effectively,
like, you need to go into that rabbit hole.
What I will tell you is that we're immediately going to
what
add
are you
two-factor
trying
auth
to say
all of our support accounts. So you can bet on that, and that is not a problem. That is not a problem for us to do there, because the policy around that is like, well, you just like walk in person to the frickin' you know, guy. If you lose it, then you can physically deal with that, right? So that one is how we sort it out. But as I said, we will get to it, and it is a serious thing. We definitely want to have this. It's just a question of just getting it done, really, like all the policy stuff around it and all of the like. Yeah, just as I said, it's all support nightmare around how to deal with it.
Well, I appreciate the extremely vocal transparency about what's going on. I'm sure lots of people here watching appreciate that as well, and we won't grill you about it or anything. So Appreciate that information. We'll move on here to a little bit more fun topic, which is upcoming content for the game. So we've been asked, one of the most common questions we've had here is things like roadmap for cadence of releases. You know, you guys originally stated 6 to 12 months for full release, which begs you know, the question, how many leagues between? There's 6 classes. So if it's 6 months, it's 1 class a month. You know where I'm going with this. So, you know, can we expect any information in terms of the cadence of releases, upcoming things like weapons, classes, skill gems, etc.?
Right. So the cadence we want to hit is sort of something similar to the kind of league cadence that we've done before for PoE 1.
3
so,
months.
like that's like I think that it works
very least.
Things work the best when you've kind of got like a, you know, like releases that are fairly large that like have a significant amount of stuff in them to actually bring people back and play and so on. So you can kind of expect a similar thing like that. For the actual, like what is going to be in each release, obviously I'm not going to talk about that because, you know, we'll save that for the live stream and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, yeah, I mean, like that's kind of what you can expect. That being said, there's also a thing where like, so we want to be able to do the balance patch, addressing the balance issues that we've talked about as soon as we can. But in order to do a patch like that, you need to have enough content in it to be able to make sure that, you know, people actually come back and play it and like, that sort of thing as well. Like you need to be able to make enough changes and like add enough content that it's actually exciting. So we're going to work towards getting a like a PoE 2 sort of new league with new content in it basically as soon as we possibly can. Like so we're like I can't
want a new
exactly say a
league,
date
basically.
or anything, but like we're gonna rush for it, right? Like we're gonna really try and do it because we want to get to that point of stability of the balance that we're sort of happier with as soon as we can as well. So yeah, as I said,
Just from this, I can honestly say that like we're not going to be getting new content to this stash. Basically the stash that I'm like in control, the stash that I can only afford this content right now. I think when we have new content, I won't be rich. That's what I'm trying to say. Or I won't have this wealth. Maybe not rich. I'm nowhere near rich, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. There'll be balance changes, obviously. Maybe not to the characters when it comes to like nerfs, but it seems like the game is tiny bit changing, like this upcoming patch, right?
I'm not going to say a date, but basically just look, we work reasonably fast. We're going to try and get it out as quick as we can. Hopefully we
18
get that
hours to
relatively soon
maps
to you guys.
in.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the new act is going to be involved
Not
in this.
too bad.
But I guess
Is that a
little
fresh
extra
start,
question
SSF,
to
by
that,
the way?
when we talk about Act 4, 5, 6, is the plans to add like one act, or are you guys?
Yeah. So this is honestly one of the freaking hardest questions ever, right? Like this is actually something that
I've been wondering.
We've discussed back and forth so many times because like, if you're talking about it from a pure storyline perspective and like kind of what makes sense, like so there would be so imagine we release one act, right? It's like how does it fit exactly into having the leveling like. Do you go like 1, 2, 3, 4 and then like 1, 2 again? Like that'd be kind of weird. Or like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Or like, do you have Act 4? You can also play Act 1 or Act 4. Or like,
I have an idea. We go. Which one is the one that we haven't seen? 4, right? We go 1, 1, 1, 4, 1, 1. Okay, this is the leveling in my opinion. That's my idea.
But like it's kind of just weird, right? And like so like from that perspective it's like, oh, we should do them all at once like at some point. But then on the other hand we're like, okay, if we don't release the acts one at a time, then that kind of means like all the content from that we're sort of busy having to work on, like we still have to have good releases, right? And so that means we have to have like more stuff in what we do release if it doesn't contain an act.
Also, it will
this,
need
like,
a lot of
like,
testing
puzzle
there
around
too.
this.
Then,
So it's like,
if they don't release it.
And what we kind of thought, like, there are issues around this, but effectively we're like, okay, well, we're going to have to make Act 4. We have to be making Act 4 in the background right now anyway, right? So we don't technically have to decide what we're doing about this, like, right now. So, like, that's sort of happening.
Not decided yet.
Anyway. So I guess that is to say that, like, there's still a lot of argument about this fact. And yeah, it's honestly such a hard one because I don't think there's a really great answer. Like releasing the acts one at a time would be making content so much easier because we get to immediately utilize all the stuff from that act to like make other content. Like it'll be so much, and like also it just immediately makes a release feel really big, right? So like that would be something that we could do. But and it also would be good for our studio.
There won't
like,
be a big reset.
That always happens where like
and a big patch soon. It's
you say okay, this is where
he's talking about it right now. It will be with the league launch, which is
then, like,
probably a
we'll have
3-month
definition of
period.
from,
So
like,
it's
oh,
about
people are
like
actually going to play this versus like it just has to be really
Late
internally,
February, you can expect
so, like,
something
for
like
just
that.
a production perspective, like I feel like the game will get made
Maybe
faster
early
if
March.
we do release the axe, just because it forces us to actually release them and like forces everyone to get it into a really playable state. But yeah, on the other hand, as I said, there's like all these kind of like practical issues with it. So
Damned if you do,
yeah.
damned if you don't, huh?
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a tough one. So yeah, I mean, I guess the answer to that is still to come, and we just need to work out what we feel about this one way or the other. So yeah, I guess you'll see when
Still
we
not
do
maxing it
our
out,
next
though.
when we do our next announcement what we've kind of come up with. But yeah, as I said, in the meantime, it's not like we don't have to just make Act 4 anyway right now in the background. So that's yeah, they're continuing to do that as well as all the people on the more sort of balancey
just
side
gonna
of
run
things
it, I
working on
think.
balance, which will get shipped much earlier.
All right. Let's just move on to the next topic to make sure we actually cover these questions. We have a long
Yeah, yeah.
list.
Sure.
So we're going to talk about a can of worms called State of Magic Find. Now, the
That is a
perception has
can.
been
Can of
one thing.
worms.
And I mean, shout out to Slippery Jim for the absolute insanity that he goes through, which is kind of showing that it's fine. So what do you guys think about Magic Find in its current state?
This is a very tricky question. Now, what I will say to start with is that like the way the Magic Find formula works in PoE 2 is literally identical to how it was in PoE 1 as far as diminishing returns and everything is concerned. The difference is just down to what Rarity is giving you as opposed to what it was giving you in PoE 1. Our argument for why Magic Find should be fine in PoE 2 is effectively like we're not doing what happened in PoE 1 where you got like all these quantity mods and all that sort of stuff like that. Like it's effectively the Magic Find in PoE 2 is what PoE 1 had back when PoE 1 was first released, right? Where it was kind of like, and it kind of was fine then. So the argument was, well, why shouldn't it not be fine now? I guess there's another, like compounding with this, there's another contingent of people who would say that like anything at all that affects item drops should just not be a thing at all. And which is like a position you can take. And I don't know that I necessarily, agree with that position, but like, you know, it's another position you can take. So I guess all of that really is to say that like I don't think there's anything about it that's not working as it's intended to work. And ultimately the purpose of something like Magic Find is to kind of give you another axis of build design beyond just like doing the most DPS, which, you know, like that's kind of its ultimate goal. So yeah, but I mean, that's kind of where it's at really. There's definitely more to look into here though. I don't know if you've got a different opinion.
Not really. I was just thinking the main difference between, say, PoE 1 was you fully saturate into every
right?
single item being a unique item.
That's the difference.
Whereas in PoE 2, you saturate into higher tier rares. You actually cannot fully saturate into unique items. It is impossible. So yeah, it certainly holds different value. I don't know how, but then again, I suspect a lot of the audience who are finding Magic Find to be a problem would find it a problem in both games, which again, completely fair perspective to take. I don't know. There's a little bit more to look into here for sure. Like we come back from holiday and we're like, all right, let's fix everything we can in a week. There's this list of like 100 things and we pick what we think is the most impactful 10. And so, yeah, there's a lot of these things that are just outlying on a list for us to really actually look into and investigate more and see, you know, what part of it people are liking and not liking. Because, you know, even though you had Slippery Jim do this, you know, the great service, there'll be a lot of people who just disagree with that. He says it's fine. There'll be a lot of people who disagree with him as well. So yeah, we just need to look into this a bit more honestly to get a better conclusion. But personally speaking, I don't think it's a problem currently. But I might change my mind as well upon reading all of this and looking into it more. So we'll see how it goes.
A follow-up.
I don't know if you. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can continue.
No, you go for it.
Sure. So a follow-up to this is, okay, so the state of Magic Find is a question. Specifically, do you have a belief on how you believe it's influenced the economy? I'm seeing a lot of comments sometimes when I'm live where people are like Magic Find's the reason, inflation's the thing, etc. So what is your guys' belief in terms of how much Magic Find is actually making an impact in the current economy?
Actually, there's another difference from PoE 1, actually, of course, is that Magic Find now increases the tiers of currency you find.
Yes.
Which,
I don't honestly think that we have an informed enough opinion on this topic, actually, to be fair. Yeah, like I don't think it's been our primary concern like this week because of the fact that like there's other things that we think, you know, like we really wanted to make sure that the actual play experience is prioritized as the main thing. Like that's the kind of our focus right now.
Fair
Which I mean,
enough.
obviously this affects it, but it's kind of like something where like it's a slightly longer term concern. So it's something we need to definitely investigate more. But yeah, it was really like that map playability and like making sure that because like I mean, when people are dying to things that they think are bullshit and stuff like that, that's kind of like something that we were more concerned about. So yeah, that's I would say we. Need
I think to be
definitely do
fair,
more.
it's completely
We
fair
need
for
we
them
need
to like
form an
use
opinion
this
about
experience
before we can say more about it. I
and
think.
just like tailor their
How
league
about I phrase
reset
the question
thanks to
this
this
way?
experience.
In
Like
PoE
this is
1,
completely fair, honestly.
item quantity was removed, which affected
Mhm.
currency. In PoE 2,
As
you
long
now
as
take
they,
that into
Yeah, I see what
rarity.
you mean. Yep, that's a
Yeah,
very
so
good
what
point.
is the reasoning for
Take the feedback.
reintroducing quantity that you made a decision to remove in PoE 1?
I don't think that we looked at that as reintroducing quantity. But you are correct that it does increase the quantity. Well, okay, it's not that it increases the quantity of currency. It increases the type, the tier of the currency you get, which you would look at that as quantity because like you don't care about like whatever transmutes are
and
dropping.
augments
You only
become-
care
Yeah.
about the higher ones, and so as far as you're concerned, that is quantity. So I would say we just didn't really look at that as quantity, but you're not wrong about that, right? That is true.
Well,
Yeah,
it's certainly going to be a problem if it is perceived as that having enough rarity is the only way to thus have enough currency to say roll.
Caleb was saying, is there any mechanic which you think is the best long-term farm for Spark Stormweaver? Wanted to try the ritual, but to buy into make any currency seems too out of reach. Yeah, Breach feels good, but can't tell if it falls compared to others like Simulacrum or Ritual. No, Breach is the best one by far. So Breach is also affordable. You just need to be able to like kill the boss a couple of times to make some sort of like a passive tree like this one, right? And then afterwards, I would probably try and like do the maps, like do the good maps in like open areas basically, and try to like get the most out of my Breach. While I'm also like buffing, you have like two different type of like strategy when it comes to using your tablets, right? I personally like variety a little bit, so I try to like put one Breach, one irradiation, and sometimes one ritual, sometimes one delirium, sometimes two Breach. But like you could also go all in, put like 4 breaches here, so that like you get not only quantity but also maybe even like an extra Breach spawn, etc. in your maps. You know what I mean? So that will be kind of come down to you, but I think Breach it's on another level right now compared to like anything else when it comes to just raw mob farming. What is going on right now is that like they were just talking about quantity and the rarity, right? So we can right now affect the amount of like currency that we can get just orb dropping in the game, that we can get with not only quantity but also with rarity that is on our gear. And Breach just keeps on spawning more and more and more and more mobs, obviously, so that like we have even more chance of like dropping these quantities. So eventually, if they nerf Breach, perhaps that's not going to be as much of an issue. Who knows? That is also why it's a good testing platform right now. When they launch the league, I hope it's not going to be terrible, but they'll have a chance to like address these things. How's it going, Caleb? Welcome, bro.
All your maps effectively.
sure.
And
That's on
also have
97,
enough to
thank you very much.
Spend on gear and whatnot. Like
Right.
that's certainly a problem. In which case, some adjustments probably likely do need to be made. But again, we're just speculating now. We need to look into this a heck of a lot more.
I
in
think
order to
Spark
get an
is
actual
best versus
informed
stuff like
decision there.
Breach, basically. Yeah,
That's fair. I do have one last follow-up on it.
I don't like
It's
it
a
in
discussion
Ritual.
we had
Delirium isn't too
4
bad
or
now.
5 years ago with Chris Wilson, and the topic was actually about currency drop as well. And the comment was that the numbers were fine on GGG's side. The numbers looks fine. It is accurate. You are dropping more currency than ever. But the numbers didn't matter when the perception in the community is the direct opposite. So how do you think about tackling that specific conversation when the perception is completely opposite to what's seemingly the reality of things, right?
So are you?
Why does he say
are you saying that
reality
the community
things
perception is
though?
that currency
Isn't
doesn't drop
reality
enough?
the numbers?
It's the perception is that rarity is a mandatory stat.
Oh, sure.
because
No,
the
yeah,
pseudo
well,
quantity.
absolutely, right? Like, look, if the community feels that way, we should absolutely look into it and do more about it, right? Like, but bear in mind that Yeah, I sort of often say, like when the community has a problem, this is an invitation for us to understand the problem and then for us to address it in the way we want to address it. And that way isn't necessarily exactly what the community is saying, but it's just effectively like, I do want to keep doing things until the community is no longer unhappy about it. But that may not necessarily look exactly like in the form that they're expecting, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we have to look more into this. That's absolutely the case, right? And we can tell that because of the fact that people are unhappy. So yeah, we will look into more into it.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of unhappy, we're going to get into state of melee / maces is the next portion of the questions here. So let's talk about warrior and maces. What are your guys' feelings currently on the state of maces? How do you want mace skills in particular to function in Path of Exile 2? Obviously, they're very long cast times. Movement of mobs can be very quick. You can get stunned, interrupted. On the tree as well, there's many nodes that literally reduce like attack speed in order to gain other things. So more or less, warriors in a position where a lot of the people feel like it's clunky, too slow for the current in-game play loop, or warrior feels like maybe the first
really in
class design
control
when the vision of PoE 2 was fairly
cancel animation.
slow. So what is your guys' response as to the state of mace skills, and where would you like to take it?
Well, a first question I would have for you is, do you think it's a problem during campaign or only in endgame?
I would say it is more specifically a problem in an exponential ramping as you continue the game until you hit a point where there's pinnacle bosses, and then you can kind of one-shot pinnacle bosses with some of the setups currently. So there's a mid portion of the middle to later in-game in which it feels like a problem, specifically because you have things like volatiles that actually track you, and if you stay in position, you're heavily punished. So it seems counterintuitive to the design of some of the mobs.
I do think that there is a problem in game here. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do about it yet, though. I'm glad to hear you say that it's an in-game issue and not a campaign issue, because I have to say that my experience playing Warrior through campaign is actually that it's fine. But I did hear a bunch of people talking about that as if that was not fine, and I think that it is. Like, I think, or at least I can't reproduce the issue.
I didn't really play Warrior through the campaign. What do you guys think? Is Warrior completely fine through the campaign? I would actually like to hear your thoughts about this. %100% fine in the campaign. Sooner than 3 months. Rushing it. Yeah, but like they do need to rush for a 3 month. They also have PoE 1 that they need to take care of, so I'm 100% sure they're incredibly packed. And with this like 16-day or whatever like holiday, on top of that, like just a new launch with massive numbers, like they do need to rush for sure, regardless of the launch time, I think, of the league. Bone Shatter is one of the strongest abilities in the campaign. Yeah, perhaps actually. I have a feeling this all comes down to like personal experience, and this personal experience definitely expands on just a weapon. Like in the campaign, like don't you guys think, especially for the attack skills, right? Like weapon has such a huge impact, it is ridiculous. And then that comes down to like we don't have crafting bench and stuff like that, right? Like what happens there is like you either get lucky or you trade. But often you don't get lucky, obviously, because like the drops are not that crazy, for sure. Why can't I put this? Okay. I don't know. So I think it comes down to a little bit of like scarcity of weapons, perhaps, or like how SSF is like
really
failing to find
issue. And I don't know that I've got a solution
weapon
for you right now,
upgrades.
but
Not sure.
yeah, like we do need to, like, once again, it's one of those more subtle things that we need to look into, and I suspect that the big balance patch will be looking at that a lot more. There is something about the warrior that doesn't scale in the same way that some of the other classes do, I believe. But that we sort of need to understand what the other classes end up looking like as well a little bit to understand that as well. Yeah, I don't know if you've got any more different opinions about that.
Well, I mean, the attack speed is a big part of it, right? You obviously have, that is a multiplicative axis that every other, cast speed or attack speed is a multiplicative axis every other, or I guess comet trigger speed, that every other class is getting, and the warrior has a deficiency in that. And even if you were to get it, yes, obviously there's the fixed attack times, which don't scale.
Yeah.
It's probably a combination of those are too punishing, or there's too much of them, and there's not enough attack speed available. It'll be somewhere in that region for sure where we have to make some adjustments, and it probably won't even be that drastic to get it to feel right. And of course, like, it is easy to compare it to, especially, I know you said more like late mid to mid end game thing, but like when you look at the like top end, it's very easy to compare it to the absolute insanity that is, like, you know, Pillar of the Cage God with Hoa and all of that, which is just ridiculous right now. It's very easy to compare it to that and be like, well, Warrior will never be viable. But there are also a lot of quite good end game warriors that are certainly being played, and you know, I don't want to certainly make it seem like it's completely useless. And I mean people using maces, not just people who are doing it for the ascendancies.
Karn's a notable example. He's like level 99 in SSF, but he's having to use the Herald of Ice tech, which is very highly speculative to be nerfed, right, in order to make it feel good. So while I would agree there's people that are doing it, I would also argue there are people that are doing it as a masochist in order to be like, I'm a warrior guy, I'm going to do it regardless.
But there are also others, maybe not that advanced and not that far up in terms of her level. But yeah, sure, understood. Like, it's certainly on the weaker end at the end game, like, without question. That being said, I don't think it will take too much to get it there. But yeah, again, it's part of this massive balance, you know, recalibration we didn't need to do now that we've seen the state of everything.
Right.
Warrior or mace skills are certainly on the ones where you're going to do a lot more bringing up than you're going to do bringing down. You know, aside from things like, you know, the Hammer of the Gods just in one shot with bleed and then the boss is dead and you don't do anything, right? You get those anomalies out there where it's like, yeah, they're going to die in one shot no matter what. You know, things like that aren't going to be buffed necessarily, but
fair enough.
There is more to buff in the mace spectrum than there is in most of the other things, I'd say, yes.
So that answers the offensive spectrum for the warrior. Now let's talk about the defensive. And one of the things in the reveal video was armor, for instance, is getting fixed and or buffed, I should say, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
I wouldn't. One of the reasons we didn't dwell on that too much is because I wouldn't want people to think that that's more of a change than it is. Like, we are doing a bit of a buff to armor, but it's not like the hugest deal.
Yo, this thing is huge. I
think there is more we have to do. Like, there's more complicated stuff we have to do with armor, I think, to make it more interesting. But there's a lot of arguments about this. One, because it is like, yeah, I'll just say that. There's a lot of arguments about like how exactly this should be addressed. One concern that we have, which is probably totally out of left field as far as what the players would say, is that we don't think that there's enough of a difference between the big hit and the small hit.
This is good
there's
too.
a number
like
in the formula that is different in PoE 1 than it is in PoE 2. That results in the armor being the difference between a small hit and a big hit in PoE 2 and PoE 1. It matters more in PoE 1. But in addition to that, so we actually think that PoE 2 might be wrong in this regard, and we need to change it. But in addition to that, there's also a thing that's happened where like white monsters can hit harder in PoE 1 and PoE 2 than they did in PoE 1.
True.
And that means that the thing that armor is supposed to because like part of the intention with armor is it's like, okay, like when you're talking about like big boss hits, like it has less of an effect than what it would have off like a bunch of small hits. But sometimes the small hits from a white mob are not even that different from what a boss hits you with. And so this is actually meaning that the sort of the idea of armor being based on the damage hit is kind of got like a few issues that we have to deal with. So I don't know if you've got any more thoughts on this particular topic, but it is like something that we have to sort of worry about a little bit.
Yeah. It's again one of these things I mean, I hate coming in here so unequipped, but again, it's just the timing with the holiday and all that, with all these things where it's like, have to look into, but that is the nature of it. I mean, especially once there's an actual released product, it's like a good, 50% of our time goes into having to investigate and look into live operations problems like this.
So we are buffing a little bit of armor a little bit in this patch for like to because there are some issues there. But honestly, the full solution for armor is going to have to be more complicated, and we're going to have to sort of work out some stuff around it. It's there's definitely something.
It's good to hear that like it's not done. They also believe that like armor is probably not fixed after this.
Mechanics that
this is good to hear.
For sure. Armor has. Which is another sort of side thing, which is like not entirely obvious when you're designing it initially. So it might be that there's more like supplementary things that the armor, like the strength characters effectively need to have around defense, and so like stuff like that can kind of matter a lot. So
Well, like Wind Dance is universally just better than Scavenge Plating, as an example, if those are meant to be paired. One is just like you have it, and the other is I have to armor break, and then on bosses it's much harder to sustain. So we've made changes there, of course. We did buff the armor. I'd say it's in the it's obviously hard because of the big hit, small hit, but it's probably in the like 15% more effective kind of region. Our changes in 011. And then a lot of it is also like, okay, if you consider, that evasion also applies to damage mitigation from Invoker. You got a lot of things going on with acrobatics, which turns evasion into arguably, I mean, sure, it penalizes your evasion, but like it then kind of gives you almost as much PDR against certain hits as a lot of armor, and then you have a lot of very, very strong defensive, with Grim Feast and Energy Shield, and so like it's not only armor is weak, it's also that evasion and Energy Shield have some extreme strongs that are going on. Not to say, these are all going to be nerfed. I'm just saying there's some meeting in the middle that we need to do for sure.
So they give you a feeling from, like, I played Warrior 90 first. That was the first thing I did, and I would enjoy Warrior as an archetype the most. Would you say it's a fair statement to say the Warrior and mace skills and, sort of that side of the tree in particular is in a state where it has the worst of all of them? So it has the worst of the defenses and armor. It has the worst effective HP in terms of life, and it has basically the worst offensive capabilities as well. So you could see why I'm feedbacking so hard in relation to this archetype.
Man, that's a brutal savaging, but I suppose I can't necessarily disagree with any of those with any of those assessments.
Fair enough. We can
good.
move on to the next topic.
This is
then,
good.
unless you
Yeah,
have other statements on it.
Actually, vocal like that. It's
You have
interesting.
shields.
Yeah. You're.
But it
you
is
are
true.
right
What
that,
what
effectively
can
falls in
you
that
say
way,
against this,
Which is-
right?
Sure.
That is true.
So moving forward here, we have charms. So I saw that there were some notable changes in relation to charms. I thought it was a great change to be able to see when they're actually being activated, as well as the charms that are there as well. So some clarity things in relation to charm. I don't know if I saw whether or not charms in particular actually getting tweaked in terms of number side of things, or if it was just some transparency related to charms. But how do you guys feel about?
We're not tweaking numbers in this patch. However, there's definitely something not right about charms as far as like the usefulness goes and all that sort of stuff. Like we need to do something. I don't think we've decided what it is yet, but it's clear to us at this point. Like, so charms came in like super late, and I just don't think they're quite like working out as well as I'd hoped. Like they just need something else, but we don't quite know what that will be yet. But we did want to at least make, like, one of the issues they did have is like you couldn't even tell when they helped you. So that certainly wasn't helping the case for them. So we can at least fix that. But there probably does need to be more stuff done with them, I think. I think it comes down a little bit to like how much do ailments matter against the player, and that's sort of something that
There's a few other ones. Like there's the one that's like unaffected. The next time you get slowed, protect you from slows, and honestly, a lot of the debuffs applied by monsters haven't been correctly classified as slows. And so it doesn't even work against them, and like there's a little bit of things like that where
I wasn't
it's
aware
like,
of that one.
it's just kind of a bit bad. But yeah, there's a balance there of like, okay, most people have one slot, and then you got these mandatory mods to get more. But I don't
think you get enough charm slots. Just like I feel like you barely find belts with the extra slots, to be honest.
I agree.
I mean, we really just didn't finish. I mean, we increased the weightings. We've had patched that in since release. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Can't remember what patch it was in, but honestly, we're not all the way there yet, for sure. It's one of those things where it's not like ruining experience for players, at least. It's like, just an underwhelming thing that needs some love, for sure. So it's not exactly number in the top 10 of the hit list, but...
Okay, so can't you just have it so that like belts just have like a charm, random charm slots also? It's not a suffix anymore. Just like an implicit value without like breaking the implicits of the belts either. You know what I mean? I think that would be cool. That would be even like would give another layer to the uniques as well. When you're like trying to find a 3 charm slot one, and then are you gonna vault it kind of situation, like it would be incredibly cool. But then I suppose like you wouldn't be able to like make the charms even stronger than this, because like that's what I kind of believe they want to do, right? They want charms to be much more useful and valuable than what they are right now, because right now they are not necessarily all that impactful. You can't even tell if they're ever impactful, I suppose. Most of us are probably just running like Magic Find Charm in the game, and we're hoping that like it actually is kicking in when we're killing a rare. I don't even know if it is. Like, we just have to like take their word for it. But
like without a doubt, I would expect to see improvements around there in the future.
Following up on the charms there, any thoughts regarding adding more charm slots for uniques? 'Cause it feels really hindering to equip a unique when it comes to the topic of charms.
So this is the whole like if you have a unique belt, you only have one always.
Yeah, you know, that's not a bad idea.
I also just want to add more slots outside of unique, so more on the tree and other ways to get them as well.
Sure.
So you don't necessarily have to, because like there's nothing. I think at the time we had it that like you couldn't have more than 3. Like internally it was implemented that way, and now it's like you could have 50 slots, +1 slots, but you'd only have 3, obviously. So we can give away a lot more +1 now and plus whatever we want all over the place. But yeah, I mean that is a way, yes, that some unique should have it, and probably more on the tree, more in other ways. I have to have a look at it, but yeah, there's
probably.
no harm in it now, at least.
All right. We're going to move over to another topic, which is, speaking of belts and trading the unique belts, for example. State of crafting and future plans is also involved. So I'm going to start with crafting and future plans you have there, and then we'll talk about trade. So the current state of crafting is very different from PoE 1. The perception, again, to go back on that in PoE 2 is that you're not actually crafting unless it's Rogpog crafting. You're actually just pulling the arm on the vendor machine, on the gambling machines. So what's the state here and future plans?
I don't know that there's a huge amount we can say about this right now. Unless you've got any particular thoughts that you think you can go into. I mean, like
Well,
one
there's
thing,
just-
of course, is that PoE 2 just has less crafting systems than PoE 1, just due to the fact that we add these typically with leagues and so on. So there's just less going on, which means that if you're like a PoE 1 player, then you're going to see less complexity there, for sure. But I don't think that's exactly what you're getting at, right? Like, I guess there's some theory. I mean, effectively what you're saying is people want more determinism, right? Which is like a continuous, endless thing that like people.
There's a fine line there,
Yeah.
and we're on the certainly more on the slot machine side of that line, like without a doubt, obviously, right? And there's more we need to do, I would say, to get towards that line. But that's our line that we determine. Not that I know how to describe that, because there's plenty of people who are just going to be like make everything fully deterministic all the way.
I mean, before we released, we had for a while a system that involved like deconstructing mods and then putting specific mods on items and so on. And
Like Expedition.
Kinda, like no one, like with a system like that, we were never able to get it to the point where both people who played the game were happy and like we could be happy as far as like what it would let you do. And that, like, there's still something along those lines we might be able to do one day to kind of work that out, but we just kind of haven't really hit it yet. The socketables were kind of supposed to be the thing that was you had full control over. That's like determinism, and so that like
85
Which has a
gang
lot
most
of
of the
room to
time
expand
versus
on.
versus
so
100
there's
gang.
more stuff you can do there. But I guess because people see that as supplementary, they don't even necessarily see it as part of the crafting system, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, like it sort of replaced the crafting system in a way, but then, as I said, people don't really see it as part of it. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess the thing is we just have to find a way to do more things that make people feel like they have more control without actually sacrificing the like without making it too easy to just get the best shit, which is obviously always the concern, like making sure that there's still enough room for there to be items that are significant, like that are better than other items.
Skill effect
yeah,
duration
that's
is
kinda where we're at,
15% in
suppose.
jewels.
The
I
other thing,
didn't
of
know. I
course,
guess it's
being
like
it is
red jewel
important to make
type
sure
of thing
as
though.
we
That's
add
huge, by the way.
more of this determinism or get towards that line, that we don't then just immediately devalue all item drops on the ground, right? Because that creates a different problem when now all of a sudden you don't really care about what you're finding, or you're only caring about normal items you're finding, or you create a different problem by doing that for sure.
And there is an argument, certainly by people internally, that PoE 1 got to the point of that being a problem, where you no longer cared so much about what was on the ground because you crafting would always get you something better. Yeah, like that is a concern for sure. But yeah, I guess that's kind of just our overall, just like nebulous cloud of thoughts on this matter, without really getting into too many specifics, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if you've got anything else you
Well,
want
that
to say
being
about
said,
it. But,
if we add more, we're adding something to Expedition, we don't know what it is
Sure.
necessarily or what it will do to the thing, you know, and then we're adding, you know, what I would say, you know, greater essences are too rare right now. And what else is there in there? I guess like there's certainly room to expand on the Omen system to do more there. Of course, people would argue then they don't want that to be the core crafting system to be gated behind ritual as opposed to core drop, which is then another consideration to make. And you get this cascading series of quick.
I think the problem is, for the most part, it is very, very difficult to remove something from the game after you give it. That is the huge problem when it comes to like GGG implementing things, I think, like with their perspective, right, that they're having. It seems like they're okay to experiment and they want to actually experiment and they want to give something, but like with especially Harvest in PoE 1, how they, you know, like given something so deterministic, and entirety of the community almost liked the fact that it existed, but at the same time changed the entire game. So, and you know, it was always an issue to like take it out now. So now it's kind of like a trauma or something, you know, like they just cannot attempt something courageous because like it's going to be pain and suffering to remove it from the player afterwards. I feel like, I don't know.
Questions and stuff we need to answer, of which, you know, need to
99,000
think about it
DPS with the
But
lightning,
yeah,
you know, that's
certainly there's the
insane.
feedback of like the crafting is too slot machiney. Is something
That's
we're listening
crazy,
to
by
and
the
we
way,
have
Dave.
seen.
How's the mana
and it
holding
is, I'd say that is more towards our top 10 list of things to discuss and
Can you
solve
link me your
sooner
bow,
than later.
please, Dave? That's crazy.
I
What
think
the
that
hell?
deterministic crafting is always something that's very sought after and popular. But I feel like I might be out of terms here, but my own personal perspective, I'll say that, is not the lack of deterministic crafting per se. It's lack of options to craft with. Because the slot machine crafting, we have that in PoE 1 as well. It's called Exalted, it's divining, and you know, whatever we're doing with the items. It's not deterministic crafting. Yeah, exactly, Harvest. It's not deterministic
pure
crafting
damage.
that's lacking. It is options to do something with the actual items. Because right now, you drop an item, and what you can do is annul it or exalt it, or you can pop some Chaos Orbs. And the meta crafts, which are, you know, behind the Omens, that's a different topic. Which we're going to tackle in a bit here. We talk about trading.
It's most of the survival,
but the crafting
Mario.
has less to do with deterministic approaches.
A
but
decent
rather
focus
giving
is
us
more
options
DPS.
to work with on
Tiny
an
bit
item
more,
to
though.
make us
Not
actually
much.
craft it. Even
It's
that,
about
if
8k
that
more
means,
DPS from
you
me.
know, RNG and then X-Slam or something.
Right. And if that's the case, then more content will get you that, because
that will
you
just
know,
that will solve itself over time.
Right. Because as we just add more stuff during early access, there's just going to be more and more of those kinds of, you know, crazy systems.
8k, yeah.
But we'll make sure that, like, I say over time, it's not like there's something inevitable about it for sure. But because it is a bigger problem now, we would make sure that we try and ensure that as we're adding more content, it is leaning towards adding more options there and solving these problems that people have, as opposed to just like, I will do something cool and maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. So we'll have a lot more
maybe even less at this
problem
point, Mario.
solving, designing, you know,
Because Smoke
content
Shuttle is
created
giving
by
me
more towards
2,000
solving the
mana.
problems
Like
as opposed to, you know,
like
when
2,000
you're at a
extra
point
mana.
where you have so much content a lot of the time, you can be like, what are we going to do? Let's just make something cool and awesome.
You cannot
Whereas here
underestimate
it's going to be like, let's look at problems to solve and create content that comes from that. So there's like kind of two ways of coming up with the content, and certainly
Survival, mana
this is
regen,
a problem that we're looking to try and
DPS,
solve by doing that for sure.
25% block.
That's
I'm
fair.
able to just like
Not
hug
gonna go
enemies
too deep
now,
into
thanks
it,
to
but,
that. So it's
following
just
up
too
to
big.
the state of trading. I mean, obviously we have trading being in its state that it is, but there's the volatility problem of the market's economy being player-based. For now, we have a golden standard of trading divine orbs, which quite literally holds close to zero value in terms of actual player usage outside of a handful of specific unique items,
True.
and is representative of trade power in the community. And since there is no natural divine orb sink, which exalted orbs have, for example, they just continue going up, and the inflation is just rampant at this point.
So, I would have thought that if there was no Divine Orb sync, then the value of Divines would go down rather than up. Like, presumably, if the value of Divines is going up in other currency, then it's the other currency that there's too much of rather than the Divines.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is like they become the golden standard, and since no one's using them, we get a higher quantity of them. And the result of it is that now, since that is the item people are using, or the currency people are pricing their items off, they're now, one rare, one life pair of boots with 10% movement speed now costs 50 divines, if I'm going to use some exaggerated examples.
Okay, so you're talking about the price in Divines is going up as opposed to the
value
price
of a divine is
the value of a divine is
The
going up. Okay,
item value, yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's nothing I can kind of initially go into with this other than just that, like, yeah, we just have to look at this and work out what we're going to use to sync these things more. The intention with Divines is that you'd sync them into making, like, if there's enough, like, things where you want to reroll mod values on, which, like, is uniques ideally. Like, the implication of that is that there aren't the uniques that people are wanting to roll to get good values on, right? I mean, I'm assuming that's the reason.
Some not enough. Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have enough unique items.
For sure.
we don't. We need a lot more. Which is another goal we have, of course. But I mean, so yes, there's not enough uniques, let alone enough uniques to be using divine orbs for an
and of course, the thing in PoE1 where things were
priced 45k, but I changed it to with Mahu.
You don't have anything quite like that.
Go from 280 to 300.
I mean, look, if that's a
you
problem,
lots
we'll
of
just
DPS,
find a way to sync them, I suppose. But ideally, that'd be.
I'll be curious to
ideally,
see
if
what you're
things
doing
working
differently
correctly,
than
they'd
mine.
be syncing themselves due to the fact that there's enough
The
things you want to
difference is
reroll
like you have
values
3
on,
times as much as DPS.
uniques you want to reroll values on. I'm actually curious to know whether people are even really bothering with that. Like, are people actually bothering to reroll unique values?
I guess some, but not many.
Right, not many.
Not many.
Astromentus.
Yeah,
those are like the two main ones, I think. Like, no one's gonna pop a divine orb on Avengers Gamble, so it's like that's literally gambling. But like in PoE1, we have the option of meta crafting being a currency sync for divine orbs. Former exalted. So it creates this natural flow, but also provides this crafting method for people to actually kind of help the.
Are you playing crits or
people looking for right now? They're omens, and because of this type of inflation happening, they are so far away from most players that like. Even players that plays a lot, I haven't bothered myself. I played a lot with a subathon and everything. Like I haven't touched an omen because they're too pricey to use.
I clicked wrong. My bad.
There's a very select few players that even engages with them because of how priced they are, and that just separates a lot of crafting from even a larger player base.
One other point of this is it might tie into a previous discussion we had about Magic Find influencing the economy in relation to currency drops being upgraded. So I know that's one portion we talked about. You're going to look at previously too. So I think these two probably tie in together here.
I don't know that I've got anything particularly like smart to say about this right now, honestly. Though that would be the
we
issue.
are at least making omens more common, so hopefully
yes, that's but I mean
to some degree. But I think we then also need more uniques and a lot more uniques, obviously, and a lot more uniques that would have divine syncs. And then I suspect the answer also is additional syncs of currency. Because I mean, I suspect it's a bit of everything here.
Okay. So we'll move on here. We have a significant amount of questions left. So I'm gonna try to speed up the cadence of these a little bit here as we're about maybe halfway through, but well over halfway through the interview. So we're gonna talk a little bit about state of in-game and state of league mechanics here. So I'm specifically going to go into league mechanics first here. So some league mechanics, essences, strongbox, to name a few, feel a little bit like noob traps. So I was kind of hoping to hear where your guys' thoughts are in relation to some of the underutilized ones. We talked about Expedition already, so you don't necessarily have to go into it, as well as the state of Breach. Breach feels notably like the one people are enjoying the most. Do you feel like that one's overtuned? And the other one, I mean, I don't know anyone who actually does strong boxes, so where do you want those and essences in particular, especially when it comes to the how often essences are not really rolling greater essences. Like you don't really see greater essences very often. I actually saw more in the campaign than I have in any of my in-game maps. So I'm curious about kind of league mechanics as it ties into in-game in particular.
Yeah, I mean, look, we just need to do a lot of balance here, and that's really all it is. And that, once again, just comes down to the relative lack of testing that in-game had before launch compared to other content. So yeah, there's just a lot of balance to do here.
It was meant to be more that essences, strong boxes, and like precursor artifacts are like the things you find that you can't anticipate coming. I understand you can spec into them, that is a thing, but it's meant to be more like a thing you find that you don't know is coming, whereas the I know we refer to them all as leagues, but like let's say the ritual expedition, etc., the ones you know are coming and that you're investing into. So you have these two categories where you have the ones you are adding and investing into, and then you have the other ones that are meant to be more exciting random finds. And it's safe to say, obviously, you know, there are so many essences that finding non-greater essences isn't giving you that dopamine, especially in endgame. And finding a strongbox is like anti-dopamine right now, because it just makes you feel bad, because you're like, oh,
Okay.
I need this, and you just want to run away. So, look, it's safe to say that those failed at achieving that goal, hence why we have to make some improvements to them for sure. But I want to make sure that there's those two layers of things where one's
I
the
got
things
two
stuff you
divines
predict
from
is
this
coming.
map.
You can see the icons. You can apply them with.
I think this is the first time I'm ever getting
you know, there's the
a
base
divine
types of
from
the
a boss, by the way.
precursor tablets to apply, and then you have the things where it's like, I hope I find an essence because it's like I hope I get the good one that's worth, you know, way too many of those divine orbs. So yeah, having both layers is important. So yeah, and we'll continue to add ones at that
No-nerfs
upper
to
level
ma-
that get a tablet, and then we'll continue to add ones that are more at that.
Mario,
random
can you link
find
me your
excitement in
wand
the
as
map
well,
that you don't
please?
know is coming. Because you don't want to put it all on one layer where you know everything that's coming necessarily, because then nothing is exciting. And you can do exciting within that to some degree, but not always.
No
I
nerfs.
mean, really, it all is to say that like there are some of these that just aren't as good as
None.
the others, and we just have to improve them. But
Yeah.
what I will say is that the breach monster density is probably a little on the high side. Like, it's actually to the point, by the way, where like we get a bunch of error messages in the logs for failing to spawn monsters in breach because they're packed so tightly together
Okay,
that they don't even spawn
link
anymore.
me your rings also,
so
please.
there's actually like there's an issue there that we have to do something
They're like
about. Even.
hundreds.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
So
actual hundreds of error logs of just like
Okay.
cannot fail to
I'm
place
gonna
monsters, use
stop this for 1 minute. Mario, are you free? Come, let's try something with you, if you don't mind. $262. Ah, that is the difference maker right there, Mario. That is why you're focused. That is the difference maker. You see that? That is why your focus is giving you insane DPS and compared to mine. So not only you're scaling from +1 over here, compared to me, but +3 over here, and then you probably even have +1 from a gem because like you're scaling pluses now. And then you have +2 from your focus. So this makes like a big difference from pluses, while in my side it wouldn't, because like you gain more and more the higher you scale something. I'm more about like just cast speed and mana cap, right? Well, it's very interesting though. No +1 from the gem. I use lightning master in the archmage. Me too. So it goes to 21. Wait, you have a 20. I unfortunately have only 19. I didn't drop it yet. To be fair, I can easily afford it now. Maybe I should. Mario, come to my hideout. Like, if you don't mind, let's trade weapons. And tell me, like, how your DPS is being affected. Because I'm interested in how my DPS is being affected. Looking at your wand, I would say I'm going to lose DPS. Here, trade weapons. Tell me, plus or minus? What was I, guys? Like 68 or something? Yeah, I am like -1k, I think, give or take. I want to say. So, it doesn't matter too much to me. It's actually surprising that it's giving you DPS, by the way. Yeah, it is -1k. So, it's actually affecting us both about the same. It's very interesting. And my weapon was like only two divines, by the way. Because like the cast speed is just inflating. Right? It has like an inflating value of DPS increase, I want to say. That is very interesting. Sure. So in here, 69,000 becomes 75. You see? Like it's only 6k for some reason. And I would assume that reason is mostly because of the mana. I would assume so. You lose 1.6k mana as well. But gain 45,000 DPS. So that is happening because of like how well you're scaling with pluses. Again, like 100% sure about this. But you are not playing Everlasting Gaze. Like that's at that point, that's a completely different character, to be fair. And I think, like, for my next scaling, if I wanted that amount of DPS, I would need to go that way as well. I would need to get like a crazy necklace and just complete the drop, the energy shield, go for basically keeping full mana and keep on scaling mana and pluses basically. I think that's the next level on the Spark, which is like the godlike, you know, level of scaling. I will think if, you know, I'll think about it if I want to like do it or not. Because one thing that we learned from this patch notes and interview is the fact that like we are not going to be getting massive or like drastic meta shifts or like nerfs until the league. This means that like with the amount of currency that I have, I can safely just invest and get stronger and stronger. You only have 7.7 mana and you don't have any ES. Your character should be considerably squishier than mine, I believe. Considerably squishier. But then again, you're also one-shotting stuff most likely because you have like twice the DPS. Thanks for the test. Cheers, man. Let me know if you need a guild. We have a bunch of active people in my guild. Would be nice. I crafted some 1 divine boots last night. Holy, I need some luck of that luck. Tuma, can you show me the boots? How was your boots? Let's go a little bit back on the interview. See what they were talking about. I didn't really pay attention to the last.
I know we refer to them all
minutes.
as leagues, but like let's say the ritual expedition, etc., the ones you know are coming and that you're investing into. So you have these two categories where you have the ones you are adding and investing into, and then you have the other ones that are meant to be more exciting random finds. And it's safe to say, obviously, you know, there are so many essences that finding non-greater essences isn't giving you that dopamine, especially in endgame. And finding a strong box is like anti-dopamine right now because it just makes you feel bad because you're like, oh, this, and you just want to run away. So, look, it's safe to say that those failed at achieving that goal, hence why we have to make some improvements to them for sure. But I want to make sure that there's those two layers of things where one's the stuff you predict is coming. You can see the icons. You can apply them with the, you know, there's the base types of the precursor tablets to apply. And then you have the things where it's like, I hope I find an essence because it's like, I hope I get the good one that's worth, you know, way too many of those divine orbs. So yeah, having both layers is important. So yeah, and we'll continue to add ones at that upper level that get a tablet, and then we'll continue to add ones that are more at that random find excitement in the map that you don't know is coming. Because you don't want to put it all on one layer where you know everything that's coming necessarily, because then nothing is exciting. And you can do exciting within that to some degree, but not always.
I mean, really, it all is to say
Guys,
that,
what
like,
happened
there are some of
to,
these that just aren't as good as the others, and we just have to
see.
improve them. But
Yeah.
what I will say is that
we like
the
this. My bad,
breach
guys.
monster
Sorry.
density
I
is probably a
apologize.
little on the high side. Like, it's actually to the point, by the way, where like we get a bunch of error messages in the logs for failing to spawn monsters in Breach because they're packed so tightly together that they don't even spawn anymore. So there's actually like there's an issue there that we have to do something
They're
about.
like hundreds.
Yeah.
Like
So
actual hundreds of error logs of just like cannot fail to place monster due to lack of space.
yeah. So yeah, like that There was a joke if we could release reduce breach monster density by 20% and the players wouldn't even see it because it would just result in less error messages for us. So, you know, like there are actually some stuff that needs to be sorted out there. But we don't want what I don't want is people to feel like, oh, we're just like nerfing that into the ground or something like that. We definitely don't want to do that. But some of the other league mechanics just need some addressing to make them as, you know, better. And yeah, they just need to be better. And yeah, it'll all just come down to us like experiencing them and seeing if they suck, we'll improve them. And like right now, I know that Strongbox has got the most improvement in this patch, and I know Essence has got like at least some adjustment to make them a little bit less crap. And there's probably a few more adjustments.
It's more about the combat than the itemization. That's something we still need to look into.
Right. So there's just stuff like, we just need to improve all that stuff until it's good, right? Simple as that, really.
Fair enough. How do you guys feel about the progression of players entering into mapping, going from map tier 1 to you're doing tier 16s, and then into pinnacle bossing? How do you feel like the pacing in there? They give you, one reason I bring it up is in PoE 1, we have like the quest invite version of boss fights that will happen at different iterations. So you probably know where I'm going with this.
So we're not really happy with how that is right now. Like we're not happy with how the quest. The quests that effectively we give you are just like do X many of tier Y maps. And honestly, like we can do a lot better. That's kind of a larger. It's something that I would have loved to be able to just solve instantly, but like it does need some more work. And I think there's a few different areas of this. So one of them is that like just the way the progression feels just isn't as good as PoE 1 in some way. That's kind of slightly hard to define. Like in terms of just like the feeling of like the progress you're making just isn't quite right. So I think we need to do more. Like there might be some changes we have to make to how the Atlas works to make that better.
Certainly want some bosses between those points.
Yeah. Like it just needs more of a feeling
I don't mean
of
random ones. I mean like actual ones. Still along a series of objective-driven kind of narrative-involved things where you're getting your. It's still an end game, not pinnacle. Boss at tier 6 and maybe at tier 11, and they're the quest versions, and you're doing those, and then maybe there's Uber versions, and I'm just rambling.
There just needs to be more going on with regard to how that progression feels. So that's one element. So the next one is that the tutorialization of the end game is not really there. Like we need to do more around this so that like it actually sort of eases you into end game a little bit better. As far as like if you're a new player, like we kind of just throw you in the deep. Like we fixed a lot of things about the introduction to the game through the campaign, but then you get to endgame and it's kind of like we don't really do enough to kind of really ease you in there, I would say. And then I did have a third point, but I can't remember what it was now. There was something about that. Oh yeah, that's right. And it sort of ties in a little bit to what I was. This kind of was covered a little bit with what Mark was saying just a second ago. But like the way that you progress through the tiers, like you can go through the tiers too quickly, and then you kind of get left behind with like what rewards you should be getting. And like in order for us to fix that, we kind of need to make each tier more meaningful with regard to what you have to do there and what's going on. So there'll probably just be more there at endgame just to kind of make it feel like more of a progression and more of a more. And that can include more storyline elements and more things like that. There just needs to be more, basically, just there to make that.
Guys, isn't there a button I can click to like send this all?
The game does take a bit of a turn suddenly when you get to endgame. Of like, it doesn't really feel like it. It really does feel very different.
I think there's a way to like just trade them all.
Endgame. And as I said, it's just a matter of sort of easing that transition, making that a little bit better, and smoothing out that more for sure.
I want to hone into 2 points here. Because you talk about it feels like a different game, sort of a different sense of progression, at least. We have to go from campaign into action. This is a question we're going to ask later, but it seems a good time to ask it now. Is that intended?
It gave me 7,000
as a design
BPS.
principle? Because I've seen people say that they really like the campaign, and me myself, I like the difference. But I've seen people state that they really enjoy the campaign pacing. Then they get to maps and they feel like it starts blasting. It's almost a different game at that point. So I think the audience would love to know how you feel about that difference.
You do actually. I mean, you do need to get to the point at some point where you feel incredibly powerful. However, I would say that there is like a bit of a switch flip right now that's kind of not quite right. Like there's definitely something that ain't right going on there.
Well, there's two. There is the character power side.
Is this hardcore? Just get in?
No.
No.
Are getting to endgame. Excuse me. A lot of people are getting to endgame and they aren't just becoming gods all of a sudden, right? A lot of people are struggling and falling off.
It's a beautiful thing in Path of Exile that you don't get god instantly.
It's not like you get to endgame and all of a sudden you're ultra powerful. But a lot of people are getting to endgame and then are just lost as to what to do.
That's true.
Right? Like a lot of players really like to be told exactly, here's what you do, here's what you do, here's what you do, here's your next objective, here's the thing to look forward to. And something just like complete 10 tier 1 maps is not a fun objective, right? That's just like, okay, sure, I'll do that. Where we could do that a lot better, right? Go to this place, travel here, do this exact thing, discover this, do a tower, run this breach, all these things we can have obviously way better objectives and ones that we could still design. And you're getting your passive points for each, and you're like, okay, the next thing it wants me to do is this exact thing, not just, I've completed my tier, now it just wants me to complete tier 2 maps. I see. I'll just keep going. Sure. So there's no like, whereas the campaign's very story is like, go kill this boss, get here, and you got NPCs talking to you and everything. And then all of a sudden it's just, now I'm killing stuff, ticking up this ticker, and you know, a lot of people probably aren't really getting into based on the tutorialization. They're not really getting into the towers, the tablets, all of that stuff. And then they're just also possibly finding it a bit too hard and they're dying. And so, yeah, it's not as friendly to the people who, especially non-PoE1 players, it's not as friendly to them as we would want it to be at all. That being said, like, obviously, there is also the capacity at that point to just be like, all right, I'm going to change my build to do this or go do this. And now I'm just like obliterating everything everywhere. And you don't have all those like story events breaking up your flow of gameplay. It's just like map, kill everything, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, which people love. But yes, for those who know how to do that, that happens too soon. And for those who don't know how to do it, they're like getting stuck in a hole and finding themselves very lost. So yeah, 2 sets of improvements. The people that are going to obliterate everything, they're going to have their fun no matter what. They'll get there a bit later, sure, if that's how you want to think about it. But it's way more important to not just have that like very much narrative-driven change in pace where all of a sudden it's just like, and it's gone. And now you're just doing, you know, kind of random stuff. You know, what am I supposed to do next kind of thing? And yeah. So yeah, there's a lot going wrong there. More content would do it, more time on it, more quests, more, you know. But again, PoE1 had a lot of this stuff, and it had so many different axes. If you didn't like one thing, you could do another.
For like 3D
if you didn't
ones.
like that, you could do another, and you could do certain things earlier or later. And we just need to get to that point where there's just more better, without overcomplicating everything.
So my last follow-up to this in-game topic, and I'll send over the guys to continue the conversation elsewhere. So you mentioned that there's a little bit of a separation from what I'm hearing about people that like know how to blast, like they're going to go anyway, right? They're going to crush through and destroy it. Then you have the people that are like kind of learning the game, getting into the in game that might like get stuck and lost. How do you feel about the, you know, one pour though? Then now that the game has been out of the wild, does the one pour though feel like it's widening that gap and punishing players who maybe are learning the game too much? But it's the people who are going to blast regardless. It doesn't matter because they're not going to be dying consistently in maps. So how do you feel about one pour though state of mapping currently, as well as XP loss still being fairly significant, even though in the previous interview was stated that you don't feel like you need to have the XP loss as much, considering you do have that one pour though defense. Right. We're in a state where we currently have both of them.
True.
So first of all,
let's see what is
we
he going to say to
quite
this.
a lot about whether
I'm
or not
very
we want
curious.
to go back on one portal or not, and I think that it comes down to the fact that
You cannot word it properly because people are going to be upset, Jonathan.
If like the whole death actually mattering thing, I think is actually important. Like I think we sort of decided, like, because we discussed because we were talking about the Pinnacle boss thing. Obviously, the discussion came up of like, okay, should we just be allowing 6 portals everywhere? Should we be allowing checkpoints everywhere? And I think we ultimately decided like we really don't want to go that way if possible. So we're going to try like that, and that's kind of where we came to. Like, well, first we'll try with this Pinnacle stuff. We'll like make sure that that's like something, because you know that's actually something we've got like true economic value that you need to actually preserve. And so it matters a lot more, and like the amount of time it takes you to get there and everything that matters. But I think if like then to me, I feel like to be a game, you have to have some level of failure being possible, and the 6 portal thing, like it really just does. To me, it just never really led to a situation where you felt like you really could fail in the same way. So yeah, I'm not really a fan. I much prefer the whole like one death thing. As for XP penalty, part of the thinking around that is that like it's kind of keeping you in the place where you're supposed to be, as far as like, you know, if you're dying all the time, then you're probably not ready to keep going up the power curve. But I mean, maybe that's like the wrong way to look at it. I'm not sure. I don't know if you've got any different thoughts about this.
If you're dying,
do you realize
right now
how many hours you're losing?
So if you are dying all the time, you're not going to get maps, and thus you're not going to go anywhere. And you also, it's kind of like an add insult to injury. You're also now just not leveling. So
but
yeah,
you do have to have it. So
I agree. I think there's a few axes, and I think they're just a bit too severe when all combined together. Combined with, I also think that the very start of maps is just too difficult. Like, I think we should ease into that a little bit. So bring that down a bit and then ramp the difficulty up. Well, I mean, we could hit the same spot, but I think it's just a little bit, and I think that's mostly due to the number of rare monsters and the obviously monster combinations. Because you can kind of avoid bosses, and like I don't mind. I think that's a little bit of a different situation, but you get all these monsters you haven't seen in ages, and they all combine together.
1 is too little. 3, in my opinion, is right.
When you go into those areas, you learn what the monsters are doing and how they're combining, and then you maybe die once or twice if you're not, you know, ultra powerful. And then you get into maps, and you're immediately
with the portals. I believe that like having more portals versus like bosses, is good for sure. But I also believe that like one portal is a cool design. That being said, I also think that we're losing way too much for dying right now. Like not only experience, but also the node, and then you have to run the node empty and stuff like that. The map that you put in, right? There's too much being lost. You're being too punished. Like I think one portal design is like an interesting and clever approach. I like that. But the price is too high right now, I think. So I wouldn't necessarily go ahead and say like, okay, give us more portals, everything is gonna be okay. You know, I would like them to look into it a little bit. It's alright. It's not the biggest design, but at the same time, like it's easy for me to talk when I have like a extremely strong character, right? I'm honestly sure that like somebody that is trying to make things work and lacking not only DPS but also survival, but also sick of like farming T5s, want to climb up a little bit and then dying at T7 again, you know. That is kind of like an Alt F4 situation. Been there myself, so it's easier for me to talk, for sure.
Sprung on like heaps of different monster permutations, and they're doing things and you're getting killed all the time, and there's a lot to learn. You do the next map and you're like, well, I can't take the learnings of that previous map and apply it to this next map because it's a whole different set of monsters. So there's nothing to really take from one map to another aside from just like maybe playing a bit more carefully, or like, you know, not being so overzealous and whatnot. So it's just a little.
You know, onto what you're saying here, this has been on my mind. I was wondering, why doesn't the game let us in to just loot what we have at least conquered? That might be like a good median, in my opinion. Like, onto your points here. That is something that I was actually thinking about yesterday. Like, you die, everything despawns. But you go in there and loot what you have killed so far and get out. You know what I mean? Because I think it's not necessarily a good game design whatsoever to like open Reddit and then see a post where a divine, you know, which is not necessarily the most valuable thing, because I've seen worse, but a divine is sitting on the floor and person is dead without being able to loot it. I don't think this is a good design whatsoever, no matter like what, you know, how you look at it. I certainly don't think so. You know, it's not supposed to be meme like this. That this is the type of shit I think that's not necessarily, you know, respecting the players' time, sort of, because you don't necessarily need to be punished like this. That's just weird, to say the least, right?
A little bit difficult there, and I suspect we need to bring down the difficulty a little bit and ease people into it a bit more. But I need to think about it certainly a lot more and actually get a little bit more analytics on it as well, and actually see what the actual problems are. And again, I read a lot more feedback, honestly.
Sure.
It would be nice if there was a way to deal with the fact that, so I mean, like, okay, the penalty for not clearing a map
Tell
we
us.
remove the extra content from the map, and it would be nice if you could just spend another map and still be able to do that content. But unfortunately, that isn't possible. Like, so for example, you know, if you failed on the boss, then you just spend another map and then you can fight the boss again and do that whole thing, right? Like, that would be nice if that was the case. But unfortunately, we can't do that because it would open up too many economic abuse things where, like, you fail the map intentionally because you want to farm the items to the rest of the area. So it's very difficult for us to come up with a solution, like, because I really would prefer that, honestly. It'd be nice if we were able to come up with a solution that would allow you to redo content by spending an extra map without having to, like, have all the problems that being able to rerun a single map would actually cause. So, yeah, like, I sort of wish I could come up with a thing for
I personally
that.
want to keep the one portal and adjust the other axes and see how that plays out before compromising on the one portal. But yeah, it's a bit tricky. It certainly is the case. We have discussed this so many times. Like it's come up, and before we released it, it's like people are going to definitely complain about this, and we're like, we know, and we haven't found the solution.
It's a common question. Had to ask. Yeah, I understand.
Fair enough, yeah.
So now there's a lot more people. Well, now there's a lot more feedback and a lot more people. It's much easier for us to get the specifics on how we could get it right, like for sure. Not to say it's now trivial to do. It's still hard. But there's a lot more information there for us to be able to, you know, take less of a shot in the dark, so to speak. So
All
I
right.
would expect some changes.
We'll have to wait and see. So we're cutting it a little bit tighter because we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to speed run as much as we can because there is a section that I care very much
How many
about.
deaths do you guys have?
Opinions.
Go ahead and check. Let
so
us
let's
know.
get there,
I have
okay?
28, 27 deaths so far.
Let's just dive into it. We're going to talk about ailments, damage for time effects. We're talking about ignite. We're talking about dots like poison, for example. So the question is, what's your feelings around it on a hit, as it scales on hit, opposed to its dot scaling, which we have a bit different scaling in PoE1 because now it's based off the actual hit you're doing, which was taken away from PoE1. So what's the reasoning behind this, and what's your thoughts on it?
Know that one?
Well, I can't remember the history of PoE1 too much, but I understand the difference. I mean, I personally prefer that the heavier the hit, the more the dot. The issue we run into is, of course, then you just get... It's either balanced around the extremely hard heavy hitters and everything else can't really scale them currently. And then you get into the thing, or you go down the PoE1 route where a bunch of skills have ailment penalties and a bunch of them don't, and that more normalizes it so you can play any skill to do the dots. I would say I prefer the asymmetry where it's like, here are the skills that are generally better. The problem is, I'd say that's, you know, again, I mentioned the bleed Hammer of the Gods thing earlier, where it's just now the bleed one-shots the monster, and, you know, you get into that kind of situation. So there's a whole bunch of balance here to get right, but I don't want it to just be like, well, implicitly, I don't want it to be like you can play any build and bleed. You should have to have some combinations, and there's more mechanics and more things we need to add, or more unique items and all of that stuff.
Specifically,
It's tricky because generally speaking, when we're doing first pass balance things, I really like to avoid... I like the bumpiness where we've got like different skills being better at different things. And
Sometimes it just happens.
I really don't like it when we end up in a situation like, for example, in you know, you've got the whole like damage effectiveness on spells in PoE1, and it's like, this is a thing you do to solve a balance problem. Like, this is unrelated to ailments, but like I'm saying, it's just another example of one of those things where you like, oh, I've got this problem where these skills are sort of all out of line with each other, and so we have to do this like sledgehammer to it. We're like, okay, we're gonna go and we're gonna normalize everything, and I kind of hate that type of thing, and I really try to avoid it wherever we can. And it's kind of one of those annoying things where as games get like, as you do more and more of this balance stuff, you kind of end up with more of these kind of normalization procedures that go on. And so it's nice if we can find ways to avoid it if we can. And that's kind of why I like to try and pitch everything. Like we started with in PoE2 with a lot of things having like going back on a lot of those sort of normalization procedures we did from PoE1. And ideally we would be able to find different solutions that don't involve having to do that. You know, yeah, it's one of those things that I worry we might still having to do some of that stuff in order to fix problems. But ideally we can avoid it, and that's kind of why we went back on some of those normalization procedures for PoE2.
So one point, just real quick here about bleeding in particular, because you're talking about bleeding. Since you can't bleed on energy shield, bleeding style element builds are basically disabled against energy shield types of mobs. So feelings on that, is that something that's just like, well, that's as intended?
Can't bleed on energy shield.
If you're running like unless you're breaking the energy shield, your hit's not going to apply bleed on energy shield, for instance.
I thought that
I don't think that's even true.
the
that
thing
not?
with bleed was it's supposed to bypass energy shield.
It does,
Yeah,
but you can only apply a bleed if the hit deals damage to the life pool. So if you're playing CI, you're essentially immune to poison, care, and bleed.
I will take your word for that, but if that is how that works,
It
that
wasn't
is
how it was
not
intended to
how
be,
that
how
is
it was.
meant to work.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
I only say this because yesterday I heard someone upstairs talking about this and going like,
Am
"People
I
are just
really
wrong.
immune
You
to
can
all
apply
those
bleed
damage
to
over
energy
time
shield."
effects
Look,
since like I'm running CI?
And then I was like,
Is that true,
okay,
guys?
but I'll confirm that after this. Look, if
That
that's
is
how
messed up,
if
by
that
the
is
way.
how that works, that is like
Bleed was actually supposed to
Not
be like an
supposed- yeah.
anti-mage mechanic, not a like, you know, like as in like you can
Yeah,
bleed
yeah,
someone past their energy shield. So
Well,
like that
if
was kind
you
of the
are
idea
right,
there. So
and I'm wrong,
Yeah.
then Quinn has thrown me under the bus because I asked that question from him. So
well, again, we'll take.
we could easily be wrong. Like it's amazing
It
how
also could
yeah.
be that it has been changed internally and not yet externally.
Where am I
That
putting
is
this
another
thing?
thing also. And like someone may have fixed this some 2 weeks ago and we never got it
Something like
live or
this,
something.
maybe.
Who knows? Like,
Yeah.
I'll look into it. It's not meant to work that way.
all right, moving forward here, we are on elements. And now we are into ascendancy swapping is the next topic here. So these are kind of going back to conversations we've had previously in interviews where you guys were debating it and you wanted to see after the launch of the game, where do we stand?
Personally, I still like not being able to swap. I know no one will like that hot take. And there are plenty of other developers here, and I remember even pitching it, and I was like, "Is this your hill to die on? Is this what you believe?" But that being said, I still prefer that decision being ultra important, and I prefer that decision being locked in. But it's one of those ones that's really hard to rationalize why it's better one way or the other, to be honest. Like,
Why it is not hard to
that
rationalize
actually
why
convince
it
me
is
the otherwise,
better
because
one
it is
way.
not the hill I would die on. That's for
I
damn
am sure it is very
Um,
difficult for you to rationalize the other,
So I don't know.
however.
It's like I have my preference. I don't know why I have my preference that way. I guess I just like more decisions, especially about characters, to be a bit more
No,
final, but
like, no.
that being
He's
said, we
not
have
using the
respeaking
word
of
because
everything.
it has become a meme, but he just wants to say that, like, it needs to have its weight, basically, right? You gotta feel the weight of your choice, of your ascendancy. This fact that, like, you're doing a single choice puts a lot of weight onto your choice. And that is, like, he cannot use that term anymore as a GGG developer because it became a meme.
else. I don't know.
But
I
that's
don't really
their
know where we're
entire
gonna go with this one, aside from
perspective
like,
always.
sure, we'll reevaluate
How do we
it
put
and we'll
more
see.
weight onto the
But
player
at the end
choice?
of the day, we have a lot of developers that feel very strongly, and then we feel one way, and we discuss it with those people, and we kind of see where we land. But like, we're not going to ignore, you know, the opinions and preferences of our team, either our design team and what.
But like, why can't you switch the class then? Okay, you are taking it to the other level. Sure, you could, in my opinion. Maybe you could. You could say that, like, people are saying right now, why can't I change my ascendancy? Maybe developers will give them the right to change their ascendancy in the next patch. Aren't those people going to say that, like, the next thing that they're going to bring up, why can't I change my class then? That is your point of view, right, Screamy? But that's a slippery slope if you look at it that way. Why can I respec in that case? You know, you could take it both ways. If you're gonna, like, justify the bad design from the fact that people are just gonna do it slippery slope, while I can justify it the other way around, why am I able to respec on the go? You know? I do understand that it puts a little bit more pressure and weight and, you know, more thought into making a build. I know you cannot respec in Diablo 2, and that is why it is here to begin with. For sure, I played that game too, right? But, like, I think it's an okay thing to certainly get locked into some choices, while some others could be swappable a little bit. This also depends on, like, how you want to approach your game. Certainly. I am gonna go ahead and, like, say the fact that, like, right now it is a little bit more annoying for everybody, even the veterans or the ones that are, like, really aware of what they want to do, what they can do and cannot do while making these choices. It is a little bit more annoying right now because the entire game is, like, new to everybody. It will be less annoying if this design continues to the future. It will be less annoying, right? For sure, because, like, we will know what is coming. We will know what to do and what to not do. But it will always be annoying for the new player. Now, is that what they want to do? They are the ones that's going to answer that, right?
Whatnot, you know.
It's
just
not
to
going to hurt
overrule
me,
it just
like,
because,
soon. It is hurting
being
the
said,
people that, like, it shouldn't hurt the
I
most.
sit on one side
is
of
my
that fence
point
for
of view.
sure, that probably the majority of players do not sit on.
I mean, I'm 55% in favor of re-rolling ascendancies personally, so it's very
Me
hard for me
too.
to argue against it. When
Like,
I
I see his points, but, like, I don't think he's achieving his points by doing what
I mean, what I
the
would be
system is
open
doing
to
right
is
now.
like, I understand you have
That's
to go
my point.
online to have a look at what those ascendancy classes are, but I would be more open to having in-game things where when you're creating your character.
Fucking accuracy.
You know, I don't want to not in a way that wouldn't overcomplicate it for new players where they're like, oh, what are all these, what are ascendancy classes? What's going on here?
I'm not really in favor of that argument personally, because I don't think that you are equipped at the point of the start of the game to be able to assess what the ascendancy classes are. So it kind of does. I don't really think that really holds water.
It's less for new players, I guess. But then again, experienced players already know how to get that information. So I don't know the right solution there, honestly, but you can bet it's going to come up in discussions another, 55 times this year. So
Surely, we're just at the start of it. Again, we don't want to take too much of your time, so we just keep up with speed running some questions. And the first one here is: given the current TTK, the time to kill, of pinnacle bosses by many of the stronger builds in the game, I guess the question is, what is the goal for build power? Is one-shotting pinnacle bosses an intended power level?
Very
for
good
builds, or is
question
it
here.
the
I'm very
intended
curious
design
about the
something
answer
else?
to this.
It's
It
a
should
short answer
definitely
to that.
not be the case that the first time you fight a pinnacle boss that you one-shot it. Like, that's the
but
kind of
it's
thing that
still,
maybe
like,
you can get to after crazy
first
amounts
time
of
he
like
says.
extra items being
So it's
found,
a
but
bit
you shouldn't be
masculine
doing that the first
answer.
time you play it. So yeah, it's not right. And that's just, there's some builds that are outrageous. And, we want to actually make it so the boss can use their abilities. That's why we spend a bunch of time making them, after all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
when you
All right,
first
we'll
get
move
there
on.
and you're kind of relatively equipped for it, it shouldn't it should still be a 1 to 3 minute fight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm
One
not
to
talking
3
about
minute fight of
1
thing.
minute of emerging. I'm talking 1 to 3
That's
minutes
fair.
of actual skill combat. Not like
Okay.
Not
Well, that's a good
standing
time of
still and
reference we can
spamming
use
one button.
moving forward, knowing that's the kind of the goal you're going for, the vision. Next question is: given the difficulty of requirements to get the 7th and 8th ascendancy points, is this intended to be something that not all average players can acquire?
We definitely wanted the final ascendancy points to be something that was like a significant goal. Like, this is an awesome, like it's supposed to be quite a thing when you get the last 2 points. Yeah. As for an average player versus not, that's kind of hard to answer. I don't know if the average player gets halfway through maps really. It sort of depends on the definition. But we wanted it to be a big thing that you get.
So, map clear conditions, talking about that for a moment. Clearing rare mobs are effectively like the
Hey,
only
Swedish.
real map clear condition at the moment. Is that the plans to continue that going forward, or is this sort of one of many conditions and is a placeholder, or how do you guys feel about the map clear condition being strictly rare mob clearance?
I suspect as we get to answering the exact same ththing we talked about before with the more objective driven and learning
there
and
might be more stuff to do.
tutorialization, we'll probably expand on that. The ideal world is there'd be a whole, a nice cool set of different things you're doing in each map that isn't just killing all the rares, but they're actually a surprisingly large amount of work to do those and to do them well. Otherwise, you just end up with this thing where it's like, oh, I like this one, but these other 4 are terrible, and
You don't want bad.
into
You
those.
don't want
and,
bad
yeah.
ones of these. And
Yeah.
killing the monsters is at least something that you already want to do. So that's kind of part of the reason why
Yeah.
we sort of went with that in the end.
So,
Yeah, there's certainly more work. Sorry, go.
No, okay. So the Atlas tree currently is gated basically behind pinnacle boss progression. Kind of the same type of question as in clear conditions. Is this going to be mandated in the same moving forward, or are you guys looking to add in more iterations of progression on the Atlas tree outside the pinnacle boss clear?
We did discuss changing how the core of the Atlas progression is, but as for the actual pinnacle, as for the individual league trees, I think we were still keen to sort of have that be the kind of extra stuff that you really get at the end of that
to get
thing.
the pinnacle boss's tree, it should be killing the pinnacle boss. We want to keep that for sure.
Sure.
And for each of the contents. But yeah, I want to upgrade the core Atlas tree for sure. I think it's quite boring and flat right now. There's not a lot going on there. And part of that is to do with as we add more content, it will make it more interesting. But
True.
there's certainly a better job we can do of that. And how you acquire the points, again, getting away from that grind and getting into more like, all right, like do this 2 points, do this 2 points, do this 2 points, not grind this 2 points, grind this 2 points for the actual core tree. For the sub trees, for the leagues, yeah, I actually do like them being behind that. But ideally, each league would then have its own meta system within it to amplify itself in some way, which we don't currently have a lot of. So it's something we'd be looking into in the future when we're upgrading the existing content as opposed to adding new content.
Wasn't there a breach in one?
I bet all of our chats have been spamming this, so I'm just going to throw it out right away. Map tab when?
That should be reasonably soon, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it's an as soon as possible thing. We've got people working on it right now. As soon as it's done, you'll have it. Like, it was not a
Yeah, it'll be done soon.
we wanted it there for
soon.
release.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good luck in your Savannah. Hope it doesn't lag, because it's a bitch to play when it's
Let's
lagging.
go to tech questions, optimizations, and bugs, kind of a little category we have, and then I'm going to do some minion questions for you guys as well. Appreciate you guys taking the time. I know we're going a little bit above the time here. First question we have is something you talked about in a previous interview, I believe, with the Cicerin. It was predictive network mode and lockstep. What is the reasoning behind this specific topic, or what's your take on it, seeing how people are performing right now with this?
I actually haven't hugely investigated this, to be honest. I don't know if you've got any more information about that.
I do not.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have lockstep right now.
Oh, the predictor's just not. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
we
there.
only have
Yeah,
lockstep
okay,
currently,
right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we just need to fix that, right? Yeah. Like, honestly, the people who would be working on that have not even come back from break yet. So, it's just not something that.
How long
but
is
yeah,
the
we do need to
break?
get that working. I think it was just disabled mostly out of caution, right? Because we just expected lots of shit would be broken.
There was a few things. I can't remember
Right.
exactly what they were.
But yeah,
there
we
were,
need to get it
there were some
sorted.
things that didn't work
Yep.
in that mode, and we had to re-engineer them.
Yeah.
And yeah, no time.
Yeah. We'll get to it though.
Okay, couple just real quick optimization type of questions here. Terrain obstruction is something that has been helped a little bit in this recent, we saw in the video there, you guys were talking about making it a little bit more clear
Snow
and
breach.
transparent. But some things like trees, for instance, covering your screen from the overhead, et cetera. Do you have any feelings on how terrain obstruction is currently in the game? And is there any plans around making this a little bit
It's just a matter of individual work on
Yeah.
each individual thing, just like looking at each doodad and being like, yeah, what the bounds need to be, that kind of thing.
That some trees don't fade out
Yeah,
until you're like intersecting with them.
Sure,
And it's
just-
annoying because
yeah.
you get more, and the faster you move, the more you will be obscured. And so there's some timing changes, there's some proximity changes. There's
It's just a matter of individual
bunch
balance
of
things.
you
To be
know,
addressed.
There's still some areas.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then as far as optimization is concerned, I mean, we'll just keep working on it, right? I mean, in the background, you've got the engine guys working on things. There is one very annoying crash that is very, very hard to debug that happens on, I believe it only happens on NVIDIA cards. Where like after sort of an hour or an hour and a half kind of thing, you'll get a crash to desktop, and it's been very, very difficult to track down, and we're adding more debug stuff. In fact, I think there'll be a patch. If we can't work it out internally, we'll actually probably eventually make a patch where we tell people to like turn on a command line flag that will enable extra debug information, because the thing that will allow us to debug this does reduce frame rates by like 5%. So we might actually ask people to like, hey, turn this on until we find the problem, and then it'll reduce your frame rates a little bit, but it'll help us track it down. And then once we've got that, then we should be able to work it out. Effectively, they're like concurrency bugs within the GPU. But annoyingly, we were also told that the next version, like NVIDIA told us that the next version of the NVIDIA driver does make the crash go away. But then they also said that they didn't know why that was the case. So like, I don't know if we can 100% rely on that either. So yeah, there's something weird going on that's like quite hard to track down going on here. And hopefully we can work it out soon. But yeah, we just need we need more debug information. It's very hard to track down, unfortunately.
Got it.
And it's kind of annoying how it takes so long to reproduce. Like there's even a thing where like the first hour after we do a restart patch, we don't get any of those crashes because it literally takes more than an hour to reproduce. And then after that, they start coming in. So there's like something weird going on there. But it's the most common crash, and like we're just like really annoyed. It's just very annoying to deal with.
Thanks for the answer, because that was a very common question. People were talking about crashes and wanted to ask you about it. So good answer there.
Yeah.
At this portion, all we have left is some minion questions from Ghazi, just a couple of them. And then we're into the rapid fire portion, and then we're pretty much done. So try to get you out of here in 10, 15 minutes. Go on, Ghazi.
Sure.
Let's just dive into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about Hodor, minion body blocking in doorways. Let me just add the word, come on.
So,
Solutions,
I
please.
mean, yeah, like this is something that we need to work out a better solution for. Like what I can say is that, okay, so people will immediately say, oh, just make it so that minions can just walk through each other. And it's like, we've done that and it sucked. And it doesn't just suck because of that it looks bad or something. Like it sucks to actually, like, it actually just makes the minions play worse. So we need to find another solution that's like smarter somehow that like fixes that issue. One thing we are planning on doing, just as like as an initial test that we've got, I believe someone's doing at the moment, is at least making it so that when minions die due to distance, that they respawn immediately near your character rather than it waiting till the next refresh. So like that'll at least maybe help a bit, but I don't know if it's like the full solution by any means. But there's something we have to do around this, but I honestly don't know quite what it is yet. And as I said, like all of the obvious solutions, as you might say, we have tried and they weren't great. So it really is going to take something a little bit more complicated to do to like work out what we're doing here. But yes, I appreciate the issue for sure. Like I'm not saying that we're not going to do something about it because we have to. I'm just saying that like it's not clear yet what that is. And at the very least, in the meantime, we can do the respawn instantly upon timing on the distancing out which will help a little bit maybe. But yeah, more needs to be done.
It's one of the big problems people complain about with
For
the
sure,
build.
for
yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
For them rubber banding to you resurrecting is much better than them dying, because that is part of my other question I had here.
Yeah.
However, in PoE 1, there is a feature added as a modifier on well-telegraphed boss abilities that you're supposed to, as a player, dodge, where your minions can't because you can't control them, so they do less damage to them. PoE 2 doesn't seem to have this based on the data mine I've been checking, which seems to be that they're just expected to literally just die, and then you have to sit there and wait for them to resurrect. What's the reasoning for not giving us convocation, which would also assist in the whole minion body blocking doorways and tight corridors?
Are there not minion things in the AI? I thought we did do some of that.
Not that
well,
I've seen.
This I can't remember exactly an AI.
So no, I mean the damage.
From
thing,
a damage perspective, not hugely, no. We were tinkering around with this whole expectation of like how often, if you have like no investment and all this, how often are your minions supposed to be permanent minions, supposed to be dead versus alive, and then what are the things you can do to keep them alive? Because it was meant to be more in order to have your minions, otherwise they're never dead, right? They're permanently alive, and then the DPS is you just running around doing whatever you're doing.
That is really the issue, just to be clear, is that if we make it so that boss abilities aren't killing your minions, then that means that, that would effectively mean your minions would just never die. And so then what's the...
It was meant to be more of active, what are you doing to keep them alive actively? Sure. And we haven't got that right. Like, for sure, we haven't got that right.
That's fair,
so,
to
guess
be
Bolden
fair.
Offering
It's
was meant to be
okay.
one of those examples of, like, boss slams coming, and then... But also then you got a multi-thread, you got about how do I survive, and how do I do this at the same time? So there's certainly something going wrong there where we haven't, and I believe there's probably still a lot of boss abilities that just haven't been tuned correctly with respect to, you know, again, how often they're killing certain minions versus not. Because there will be things, I'm assuming, that are just completely unavoidable and they just wipe out your entire minion thing. And then it's like, well, what was I even supposed to do? So the problem is, as soon as you get into this build, the level of like detail that you have to do, where you not only have to, sure, there might be some system change, and it's easy to probably do a cop-out that's just like, whatever. You know, it's actually the right answer is to go through every single boss and test them and go through monsters and go through mods, and like it's a huge amount of detail and it takes quite a long time. We have people like kind of actively providing that more specific feedback, and we are iterating on it. But there's still certainly a handful of things we need to do. Otherwise, I'd say that blocking the doorways is a more catastrophic problem for sure, like where they just like can't get through, and they're like running off screen and them dying. So like we're focusing more on that stuff first.
Guys, I think I'm gonna wait for like a
balance with
minion
respect to
fix
how often
patch
certain
until I
skills
play
are
a
just
minion
wiping
build
out all
then.
your minions and, you know,
Because it
all
does
that.
sound annoying,
Yeah,
the
I
things that you
understand
need
the
to
idea that the
put up to.
are supposed to kill them. The problem is when a boss leaves a damage over time effect on them, they kill a bunch of them, your timer starts ticking, and then the dot kills the next one, it resets, and then it kills the next one, it resets.
Yeah.
You just have to wait for all of them to die, and now you're sitting there doing nothing. You feel like you're in a wheelchair, not able to run around.
Yeah.
But an instant use convocation could be a solution to that, which would also help with the whole body blocking. A lot of people have been spamming me about make them give us convocation, and I'm in that category as well.
It's insane no knowing. I
But
stopped
moving
playing
on
minions
to
because of
the
that.
other
Too many
questions, not
doorways
wasting much
also.
time, and
Yeah.
that is a very interesting question.
What
is the
Gazi just
reasoning
said
behind
is
making the
also
minions' movement speed a
it must
direct
be pretty
replicated
annoying.
copy
Like the
of what
fact that,
have
you
as a
know,
player,
something is dying to a
including when
dot,
get
but
a
you would
minion
rather just like
movement speed debuff
wait for
reduction
another one to
yourself.
spawn,
So
and now
me
that
and
guy
Mark
is
were actually
dead.
quite surprised to
Resets the
learn
entire
that
timer
when
and
you
stuff
get
like
a
that.
debuff on your character,
That
that it
sounds
causes your
terrible.
minions to slow down.
Yeah, it's not intended.
That was not intentional, and so we'll just fix it.
We'll just change
Yeah,
that.
we'll just fix it. That was not a thing we even realized was the case.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one is
Guys, most of the things in this interview that like community asked, GGG sort of answered with like, we are already aware and it is being worked on and we will do a little bit more testing. Maybe some of the answers were like, you know, we're not going to fix it the way that community wants. Probably not. But it will be different than this type of thing. Like, I think that was like the most negative answer from them. Most of the time it's like, yeah, like it's not supposed to be working. It's not properly working kind of thing. It's kind of cool actually to hear this. It's very nice.
tooltip is a bit wonky with the minions. with it
89
being incorrect
splinters.
in cases. Especially
From just a single
accuracy,
breach.
actually,
That's
being
huge.
very wildly off, where it says you have a 100% chance to hit and it's not hitting, and then the tooltip is missing altogether on things like rating spirits. And sometimes when you change a gem on an unrelated ability, suddenly your tooltip on your damaged minions is also changing randomly. Is this something
That
you've
sounds
tracked,
like
or-
a bug to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll fix that as soon
Yeah, yeah.
as.
I just need to look into what's
Our
going on. With it.
developer responsible, well, they might be back today, but our developer responsible for that has still been on holiday. So as soon as they're back, they'll
Yeah.
get onto fixing them.
Yeah.
A
There was
handful of
quite
tooltip
a lot of
related
rushed, like description stuff happening right at the end of development there. So I'm sure there's stuff, even more stuff that's wrong than that. Just like with that stuff.
I'm
We need to-
surprised that tooltip stuff is as good as it is, given, like, I remember 2 weeks before release, I was like, this is a dead feature. Like, it may as well not exist. And then all of a sudden it was at least something that I was okay, that's a pretty good effort on what they did. So there's just more to do, though, of course.
Yeah. I got plenty more minion questions, but I'm just gonna go with the one that's been spammed the most, and that's Spectres when.
So soon, fairly soon. It took more work than we expected, actually. Like there was just a lot of there was a lot of specific shit we have to do, but it won't be. It's not too far away.
Well, the designers have to go through, all the monster designers have to go through and make spectrable versions of every
Soon,
monster.
fairly
Which in
soon,
PoE 1
pretty
was a lot
soon.
easier, and in PoE 2, there is so much more manual designer-based scripting on like a monster-to-monster basis that we have to like take out all of that random stuff to do with dialogue and like, because you don't want to all of a sudden like have a specter come out and then you're like, it dies and your character says some random thing, and because all of a sudden now your character's just spamming random dialogue all the time, and like.
But there was even stuff that's kind of stupid where it's like, oh, the idle animation of this monster is loud. And so if you've got it as a specter, then like it makes it too annoying, and like just there's all sorts of random stuff that happens when you turn things into a specter that's kind of not obvious.
Effectively, every single monster has to be.
Yes,
that is still,
true.
well, we don't want to repeat those same problems, right?
Yeah.
So ideally, the audio team actually gets time to do proper specter mastering, so to speak, on all their audio for all the monsters. But no, I believe the designers are almost done with their part, which means it's then just audio and then a whole metric, which has been happening in parallel, but a whole metric ton of balance testing to make sure that we're not just, which is a lot, by the way. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with these things.
Well, balancing the spirit cost of each of these is going to be an interesting.
Testing it with every array of support gems. And, monsters can be set up kind of jank where you're like, that's like a projectile, but like it's using some other skill that's kind of actually like triggering projectiles. And so if you actually put, multiple projectiles on it, might not affect it in the way you think. And like from a damage perception of like, I take less damage from projectiles, that's fine. From an avoidance perspective, it's fine. But then there'll be some weird thing where, because, with like player skills, we actually code every single skill, like, exactly here's how it's meant to work. It's like quite intricate. With monsters, we're cowboys. We just go ballistic and just set them up to make sure that they're good. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, right, we had to make a specter of this. Okay, well, and then you have to hack a bunch of stuff together. But, it's also what allows us to be able to make a ludicrous amount of monsters all the time. But yes, now you have to make specters of all of them, which is... You're almost done. We've almost caught up to where we were, so I'd say, soon, whatever soon means.
Not too far.
All right, so we are in the last portion. 5 minutes, some rapid fires. We'll fit whatever we can in within this 5 minutes, and we're done at this point. Thanks for going 10 minutes over at this point. So
That's all right.
I'm just going to pick random ones here. Search feature on an atlas, so you can search like.
Yep, we definitely should have that. This was something we even said before we even released.
Very
but
good.
We just
This
never
is
got
crazy
time to
good.
do, but yeah, we'll do that at some point.
Got it.
On the list.
On the list.
Tornado Bird in the game for Ultimatum is the hardest boss in the entire game, in my opinion. Personally, do you have
I
any
believe that's
feeling?
resolved, and 011 does have changes to that one.
Okay,
Good.
it's ridiculous. Got
I saw it on the
Thank you.
list. I saw it on the patch notes.
All right.
Yeah, I just can't remember what skills. Yeah,
It
sure.
was
there's something.
it was the tornado. Like it was more avoidable or something.
Yeah.
There was some stuff. It is in the specific boss balance that got addressed in this.
We'll see after
He's
the
insane.
patch,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we'll make more changes
Yeah.
if needed. Yeah.
OP.
Yeah.
Okay, so auction house. We're getting spammed about this all the time. You've answered many questions. How are your guys' feelings about an auction house or in-game purchasing or buyout on the website or anything related to that?
I mean, I've talked about what we could do before. I don't have anything to announce right now.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll discuss this more. I'm sure this will come up again.
Sure. Accessibility question. Red-green color blindness is the most common in the world.
Yeah.
It's my understanding.
Yeah.
Obviously, red on green is a very common thing within Path of Exile 2, specifically in Ultimatum, which is a mandated ascendancy trial. So for any plans around accessibility features for this?
Well, effectively, that's usually what we do for the stuff. Is rather than having a mode for it, we tend to just make sure that each thing, like we test it on people who are actually colorblind. So I just need to get probably Reese to just test all the stuff specifically because I know he's red-green colorblind and just make sure that they're actually distinguishable. I generally prefer rather than having modes for it to like have
people with that color blindness highlighting the area. So ultimatum, as you said, being bad gives us a target, and we'll start someone there.
Yeah.
Sure. Speaking of visibility, rare and blue mobs. Can't really tell they're rare and blue mobs, or magic mobs, I should say. There's no highlight on them like in PoE1. You know how there's like a little highlight around them? So you can't.
So the intention is that you can tell when a monster is based on the effect of the actual thing itself. There might be some cases where we're just not being successful in that regard, and so we just need to improve it.
We're going to do more there, and we are going to try some things that give them magic and rare identifiers that aren't. The glows just really took you out of the, like when you're in a dark dungeon and you're exploring it, like just,
and honestly,
what the heck is this glowing beacon of light over here?
I just wish Fresnel glow was just banned in games generally. Like it's just everyone just relies on it. Like, oh, we need to make this more visible. Add a Fresnel glow to it. Like it's just this freaking it's a cancer in games generally. Sorry, this is just a random side rant from me, but I just hate the fact that everyone lazily goes to Fresnel glow and freaking everything.
Fair enough. Last question related to visuals. So visual effects in co-op can be very difficult. You know, you got people spamming lots of shit around. Any opinions on toggling other people's visual effects, etc.?
I don't want to add an option like that, but there is probably more we can do automatically for that kind of stuff.
There'll be some engine-based things we can do.
Yeah, there will be. There's probably more we can do, and just like that. But in my opinion, it should be automatic, and like you shouldn't even really be thinking about it. It should just happen. Like I'm not a fan of just. Like,
I don't have the time for it right now.
It's kind of lame to me.
Unfortunately.
Fair enough. Disenchanting flask.
I can run it tonight if you like.
Things you can't salvage in the game currently in order to get like the quality bobbles back that you'll be able to do on flasks.
Right.
Is this intended?
Is there really any reason why we shouldn't do that? I know you were like, oh, it's because it doesn't thematically fit with a hammer on a bench. Just smash the glass.
I think that's why it is, but like, I have nothing against adding it.
Yeah. We can probably change that, right? Like
I think it was more like, let's do something interesting for flask salvaging and crafting later and save that, but we can add it for now.
We should just add it. I have no problem adding it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should probably nerf the drop rate of flask slightly. High levels. That's just a random note that I was thinking about yesterday as I was picking up tons of flasks. Random side note, but sure.
We've almost got all of them. Checkpoints and maps in order to backtrack in maps. How do you feel about that?
So not for resurrecting purposes,
just
for fast travel purposes.
It's not a terrible idea. I'd have to think a little bit about how we would position those. I'm not against it necessarily. I guess the feeling is that there's not so many like objectives in maps in the same way.
When you do those linear maps and you missed a rare monster, you want to.
No, you're right.
I don't think I want checkpoints in the maps.
You're right. But,
Is there anyone in my chats right now that wants checkpoints in the maps, guys?
Sure. On the table, however. Okay, being able to see gems without cutting. Currently, like you got to cut the gem to look at the list of skills.
I mean, I don't really have anything against it, but where the hell does the option go? I'll think about that. I'm not really against that.
Yeah. Maybe on the G button, top, click at all skills.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Gambler in the hideout. We have all the other vendors, but we don't have like a gambler in the hideout. For instance, like Alva normally does.
The reason for that, what was there was something very broken at the end, and we quickly turned it off. But I think we just need to fix one thing and then turn it back on.
Gambling in the hideout. Yes,
very
please.
Very bad exploitation tier, and so we were just like disable.
Mono needs more reason to
gamble.
gamble.
Kind of thing.
4 left, and we got through all of them. Okay, so Venom Quest is currently the only one that you can't reselect the rewards. So, for instance, you can reselect like the Titan Dome with the Life Flask or the Charm Duration. You can't select from like Chaos to Attributes or whatever. Any opinions on keeping that permanent, or can we reselect?
I want to add a way to change that, which I know people might be like, well, hold on, then why don't you want to allow a way to change the sentences? And the answer is I don't know. That's just how I feel. but
We'll allow you to change.
I might feel differently later. But yes, I do want to add a way to change that for sure.
Okay, movement speed on boots. Any feelings about having them be implicit, or I mean, basically movement speed mandatory on boots, or else you're really slowed down. So, how you guys feel about moving movement speed to implicits, or do you have any feelings on movement speed on boots?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have a mod that's really, really valuable on an item that you definitely want to go for.
No,
Like,
it's
boots
not.
is certainly
It
the
is
case where
not
that's, like, the
that.
most extreme,
Please.
but I don't necessarily think
Oh, maybe I should let him finish though.
it's a problem as such. So, you know, like, I personally don't have a problem with it, but I don't know if you feel differently.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like having it that like, yeah. I think it's good.
I mean,
physical
like
on a weapon.
if you added move speed implicitly to boots, would you then be like, okay, well, like IPD on weapons, like you start to get into funny territory in some sense, right? We're like, you know, so anyway, that's kind of our feeling on it.
Last two, UI customization options. Is that potential?
I mean, you'd have to be more specific.
Okay, wait. I need to think about this. Is that comparable? What he said? So if you add implicitly movement speed to all boots, then do you start adding damage to weapons? I mean, they already have it. IPD, he said. So increased physical damage. Is that comparable? So his point is, yes, you delete a boot when it doesn't have movement speed, I get it. But don't you also delete a weapon when it doesn't have physical damage? Maybe. +5 to all lightning spells. Yeah, no, but like, he still has a point, though, I think. It's interesting. Which I am left a little bit speechless. Now I'm doubting myself, like, maybe it's alright kind of thing. I don't know. So I do recognize it like that to a point where I can say, why am I dying? Like, he was just broken. Why was I dying? Guys, there's something really interesting going on here. I think I'm taking damage from these explosions. No? No, I'm not. What's going on here? I don't understand this fight. Kill him before he makes it to the next zone. Nah, he's completely immune now. Not taking damage. Hmm.
I think people just want
In
to be
general, no. Like,
Yeah.
if you're looking at like, you know,
Like, we're not going to be World of Warcraft, like,
Yeah.
like UI mod type there. But yeah, like, if there's something specific, then you're like, I wish we could do this, then maybe we would think about it. It's just a question of
Sure.
what
More
it
of a
is.
generic question I was getting. Okay,
Yeah,
last
yeah.
one, boys. State of co-op and body blocking. Body blocking, you're you know, with co-op here.
I think it's...
there's something not right about it.
There's
but-
something not right about it, I agree, but I do think you do need it to make things feel more physical. But there is something not right about it. But there shouldn't be, considering that players are actually... No, because you know what it is? It's because we changed really, really close to the end of development the size of the player, instead of changing the size of all the monsters. And I think that probably results in like a situation. But yeah, but there's something not right about it. But I don't want to just completely remove it. We might end up with a solution where like the size of a player to other players is different than what the size is to other monsters or something like that, in order to kind of like ease it. I suspect we'll do something along those lines. Yeah, it wasn't really on my radar, I have to admit, but we should do something about this. Yes.
And you'll forgive me for asking one last question that I'm curious about myself. In terms of microtransactions coming from PoE 1 to PoE 2, do we have any cadence or quantity or any information we can give them when we're going to be seeing more of our previous purchases?
Well, the main thing is that by the time we go out of early access, we have to have all of them. As for the rate at which they come through, I mean, look, we'll try and get as many as we can done in the near future. I honestly the rigging team are busy doing that, and I haven't paid enough attention to them. I need to go catch up with them and ask them, hey, how's that job going that I see you going on to?
It's probably turned into more work than we initially anticipated, for sure.
Of course.
There's a whole bunch of effects that don't translate one to one, so there's a lot of departments that have to do a lot of work. They are tuning through it. That being said, it was certainly more complicated before when we were in that last several month or 3-4 month kind of lead up to release, and it was kind of okay, we need to have all hands on deck getting certain game content done, and we generally prioritize gameplay over microtransactions especially in those kind of moments. And so now it's going to ease up a bit, and we can allocate some a bit more resources there to get more of them ported across. But it did end up being a little bit more work than we actually anticipated. It's not just a copy paste job and it's done. Some things have to be.
I just really want to map that, but I'm also very interested in how they're going to implement that, because this is such a mess right now.
Mostly due to lighting, I suppose. Really, is what is the big difference.
Yeah, so I don't have an immediate cadence for you, but we should start getting them coming out, rolling out relatively soon.
All right, and I think that pretty much wraps it. I mean, we're getting spammed about Path of Exile 1's 3.26, but unless you want to talk about, bit
of a long topic to get into at this point.
Yeah, so I figured I'd just throw it out there, but that's
good.
it. Guys, you want to wrap it up?
All right, excellent.
Let's just say thank you for coming. And, it always happens. We say 1.5 hour. It always goes above. We very much appreciate you guys' time. And sorry for going so long. But
how long was 2 hours, 10 minutes.
Can't wait for the patch notes. And we'll see you guys very soon then.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honestly, I think this was extremely positive, guys. Honestly. This was very, very positive in my opinion. All around. It's pretty good. There are good things to be coming into PoE 2, 100%. I like it a lot, I think. Guys, I'm out of here for today. Unfortunately, today is going to be much shorter than usual stream. My son is going to come from school and I'll just spend time with him. And I'll make it up to you for tomorrow. We'll have a long stream tomorrow. Is it worth to watch the whole thingy? It is worth to listen to whole thingy. Not necessarily watch almost, but there's some certainly interesting things. I think it would be very interesting if there was I didn't pay attention, but are there marks? There are no marks. So if there were segments on YouTube, you know what I mean? What they're talking about, I think that would be 100% worth then. Right now it's hard to say. Half of it was very interesting in my opinion of the interview. Thank you so much for being there and watching. I appreciate it. Thanks for the follows and the subs. And I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow with more PoE 2. And we're going to probably continue grinding. I might even open a new character in softcore, maybe even hardcore. I'm actually looking forward to leveling. But now that I'm talking about it, I'll probably try to postpone it until the patch. And then in the patch we'll open a new character either on hardcore, softcore, just mess around a little bit. So tomorrow I'll continue grinding. My experience per hour here is probably 7 million or something, but we have been doing something 16s only on experience nodes, so I would say it's about 6 million per hour or something. So it will probably continue 6 million until level 98, which is insane, by the way. That means 50 hours of gameplay right there. That is ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. 50 hours of gameplay is pretty huge. We'll see. Take care, everybody. Have a nice rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.